hear you.
Yeah, I got the Rona. It's gonna take me down. Oh, but yeah, it's been where I am. It's been growing. So, a lot of people are off work right now, and they shut down a lot of the industry.
Yeah, you said West Coast, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, I'm
assuming
in
you're.
I'm in the Rockies at the moment.
Oh, okay, cool.
Uh,
Like in the U.S. or.
yeah.
Okay, cool. I have lots of family that's American. Mostly in Oregon and stuff, but um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest mainly. Uh, been out this way most of my life, and um, been slowly trying to move to Denver. I came out here in 2015 and lived out here for 4 months actually in a hammock.
Oh,
Just because I felt like I wanted to. A friend of mine and I came out here for like we were gonna do a 2 month vacation in the Rockies and go hike the Colorado Trail. He got out here before I did and did a good portion of it and destroyed himself. Like broke his collarbone on his first day. So it just turned into a little bit of a camping trip, and then I ended up getting a couple jobs. And because I was living in a hammock, I didn't have rent or utilities, so it was I called it workcation. It
wow, that's pretty
was
crazy,
beautiful.
man. That's pretty cool though.
Yep.
I've
Getting set
never
up right now.
I've never been to the. Oh, I've been through the Rockies because I took a trip. I'm in BC, so in Canada, and
Mhm.
I've taken the trip through the Rockies to Alberta, but that's about as far as I've gone. At least driving, I've been all over the world, but
Yeah, I'd love to visit Yosemite, go to Yellowstone. I haven't been there yet.
oh yeah, that'd be cool. I've heard a lot about that. I've seen lots of
Before
videos.
before the volcano goes off.
Oh yeah, I've seen. Have you seen the pictures of the zone, like the death zone?
Yeah, it's gigantic. It's like covers like big part of Colorado and Wyoming, like a quarter of a state basically.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I we don't we have there's always earthquake risk where I am, but it's most of our buildings are made out of wood, so except for the big ones downtown, but I'm not anywhere near that, so
Yeah, it's since it's starting to warm up out here, I'm pretty much done with any weather, like bad weather situations I have to worry about, storms like thunderstorms and such. But I mean, it's nothing compared to being in the Midwest and Kansas and those areas, like you know, worrying about like tornadoes and high winds and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I always wondered how people even bother living there after in the '90s and early 2000s. There's all these documentaries and stories about like Tornado Alley. I always wondered how
it was,
people.
I grew up in the Tornado Alley, and frankly, I never really like I've seen the tail of a tornado once, and that's it. Like that's the closest I've really been to a tornado.
Oh yeah, that's pretty. That's
And
still pretty
it was
nutty.
at a yeah, I mean it was at a school track meet, and they had the whole school or the whole track meet go down to their basement, their tornado shelter. But a friend of mine actually got to stay out. Like he was, good friend of mine in my same class, got to stay out with some of the adults and watch the tornado. Like it didn't it like barely touched down, but like dipped down towards the ground like 3 times, and you got to see all
Oh wow. I guess it's probably pretty crazy to watch. I guess it's kind of rare though, technically speaking, because uh, being in the right position at the right time, probably doesn't happen very often.
yeah, yeah, more or less, yeah. I like there's a big path right next to my hometown, which is a really small town. Like I mean, I'm talking extremely small. Um, but you can see a path of dead trees where the tornado ripped right through them,
Hmm.
tore up a couple houses there. But that was the closest, and I wasn't even around that during that time. That was when I was in college.
Yeah, too bad Superman's not there just to blow them out, like in that fucking old game. You know what I'm saying?
Now I'm thinking of Sim City with like all the natural disasters and like
Oh
I
yeah.
wish I had like a Superman, avatar thing that could just go there,
Well, do you remember that?
take everything.
Do you remember that old N64 Superman 64?
Yeah, yeah. The like it's got a side scroller, like a kind of like a platformer, but
No, it's like
oh,
it's really yeah
64.
64. It's like the
Oh
really
shit.
crappy graphics.
Oh, there it is. Gosh, no, actually, I don't really. I remember it coming out, but I never got a chance to play that one.
Oh, it was absolute garbage. You saved yourself a lot of headache and money.
Woohoo! Somehow I did that with a lot of those games. Although I did miss out on some really good ones. Like I never really got to play StarCraft.
Oh, really?
Uh, I was like, yeah, heard so many good things about it. And I love real time strategy games. Age of Empires was always my thing. But yeah, there's a lot of games that I still got to. A lot of I missed out on some good ones and some bad ones. So it's kind of a
Yeah,
you know
it's like a
trade off.
fair
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, when I was a kid, we used to play Age of Empires 2, I think. Oh, I remember when Age of Empires 1 came
Oh
out.
yeah.
We couldn't afford the game, so I just would download the free sample like every day and just play it for like an hour. And then
I'm thinking of like the AOL discs that they
oh
would give out
yeah.
around that
Oh yeah,
time.
those are frisbees. We used to just like throw these razor blade frisbees everywhere cuz when we were kids, we'd literally have a stack of like 400 of them. We're like, what do we do with these?
It's like lawn darts, but better.
Yeah. Well, we had this big field near my house, so you could like hawk them, and there it was a big field. It's like you could land planes on it. It was part of a
See,
school.
I'm from the Midwest. We'd have to do that with cow patties.
Yeah, yeah. So we throw these discs like as high as we could. I mean, when you're a kid, it's probably not that high as an adult, but when you're a kid, it feels like it's going forever. Then it comes down and
Yeah.
you try to avoid it because it's like basically a razor blade. It slams into the ground and either breaks because it hit wrong or it like slices into the dirt because it was
Oh
like
my
after
gosh.
fresh rain or
It,
something
that,
like that.
that sounds exactly like lawn darts. All
It's basically the land arts. Yeah, it's crazy shit.
right, well, did you get a chance to watch that video?
Oh yeah, I watched it. I played it double speed. I believe I've seen it
Okay.
before, but yeah. So it
I
was.
just watched it myself, dude. Like just like the other day, like yesterday, or the day before. So
Oh yeah,
okay,
I
well,
think I
this seems
saw it
like
when
a
it
decent
came.
one.
I think I saw it when it came out. Was it a year ago or something? I don't know. I think I came. I think I.
It yeah, it shows it on there. I didn't look.
Yeah, I didn't either. I looked for a sec, but I didn't check the date. But I watched the whole video on double speed, so I was listening while I was getting this all set up. So
Yeah.
but basically so I agree though there are problems with like sort of let's say starting economic positions. Um, but at the same time, I don't think those are caused by like market forces necessarily, but enhanced like in terms of getting better. The only way to get better is through market forces. Um,
Well,
yeah,
I
I'll let you
definitely
go. Good.
yeah I definitely think that capitalism has done a remarkable job at supporting a extremely large number of our population, and has done so for a fantastically long time. For as short as our country is, the United States has been around,
Mm-hmm.
or and even other capitalist nations. But we're getting to a point where our population size is straining our resources. Is my opinion. Now, I mean, I could back that up uh, with some form of statistics or another, but I feel like that sentiment isn't lost on anyone. I think that most people understand that our resources are straining, that a portion of that is attributed to population size, and I think that most people have this idea that there's some form of oppression over them. Whether or not they understand what that is a different question. But I think that's a good starting point for like places that we could probably agree. Am I close?
Well, I agree that like well I'll give you a little nuance about it for me. Um, I agree that people probably feel like that, but the thing is like every generation of people has felt like that over time. Basically, the only exceptions may be the boomers, and it actually goes back to the you know who Malthus is?
Methuselah?
No, Malthus. He was like a sort of a I don't know, an economist from the 1700s. I can't quite remember, but an
Oh,
economist
I,
some
I guess
hundred
I
years ago.
don't. I actually don't know that name. No.
Okay, well I think when he said that he looked at the human population, it was around 500 million, I believe, at the time, and he figured that we would all starve to death unless we restricted people to having like two children each. Sorry, 2 children per couple.
I
Um,
feel like I do remember this.
yeah.
Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Anyways, but the if you look throughout human history, as the population grows, well, just like any environment, really, you reach a population peak, and then it's like that pushes against the resources which were plentiful before, and then people start to have to struggle a little bit because you're going against this wall of scarcity, and this makes you feel like life's difficult, it's hard.
Until a technology comes around and alleviates it. Correct.
Certainly, or many other things. Maybe a disease wipes out half the population. Like the people that survived the plague were, or the Black Death, were like living the best lives they ever did afterwards. Um, if they survived, obviously it was sad watching half the population die in some areas or more. But
Right. Besides the emotional, baggage that comes along with that,
yeah,
their lifestyle, or quality of life. That's the word. Quality of life, um, probably increased. I guess we'll take a little bit of a caveat there since we didn't live back in that time.
hmm well, you could just look at it, say, well, okay, well, there's say the same amount of food but half the people. Well, then the food's half the price, right?
Well, if there's
Essentially.
half the people and they're not producing the same amount though.
Oh, well, they uh, they were producing more per person, but maybe less overall for sure. Just because there's less mouths to feed, so the infrastructure's there. That's the difference maker is the infrastructure. If you have the infrastructure available, then you can you know your capacity for productivity expands. But if you don't
Sure, sure.
if you don't
Yeah,
have
you're
that,
relying on
yeah,
older uh the older infrastructure that was already supporting people.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if that infrastructure is the same, but the population's down, yeah, you'll have less people to do the work, but the infrastructure kind of makes up for that. Now, if you destroyed all that infrastructure, then you'd be in a really bad place. But
Right. 1-2 punch basically.
yeah, but if you increase the infrastructure, then you're in even a better place. And if you look through human history, the so one thing wrong with like I'm not saying you're a socialist or anything. I'm just going to use this term for socialist, but socialists, they look at things sort of like a pie that's complete, and you only have so many slices of the pie. So if I take a slice, then I'm robbing everyone else that could potentially have a part of that slice. But in this case, the pie size is restricted to the amount of infrastructure, or the pie plate. And what humans continuously do is we sort of increase the size of that pie plate, then and thus create more increase the size of the pie overall. Um, the problem with sort of let's say anarchists is they kind of, well, I'm not saying all anarchism is bad. I'm just saying certain anarchists, they say we have to smash the pie plate in order to free everyone from the restriction of the pie plate. But the pie plate is just
Right.
like the reality of the infrastructure that's there to hold everything together.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the state either. I see the state as a totally different entity. But anyways, yeah.
I'm fine with that. We can. Yeah. I'd rather. So when you say the state, you're talking about a more or less a political government, whether that's local or federal. But that's kind of what you mean by that, right? When you mention the state.
uh, um, the state I kind of see. Well, I mean, we could. There's lots of ways we can look at it, but I see the state basically as the entity of force which declares itself the monopoly on its use, legally, anyways. Um,
Can you say that one more time, just so I make sure I'm on the same page?
okay, so I see the state as like it's a monopoly, right? Because there's no competition. Well,
What about on a global scale?
oh yeah, on a global scale, but within the state itself, there's no competition of other states. In fact, well, there is competition, but the state actively eliminates them, and those are like gangs or
Okay, so that's what the state is basically doing is trying to remove roadblocks to alleviate the stress on the monopolized resources. Is that a good way to
oh
frame that?
no, I see the state. Well, a lot of people look at the state and they think, okay, so the state is an extension of the body politic, right, to enforce policy. they see the state sort of like this, and they see themselves as part of the state. And in some sense, they are, but in other senses, the state has its own interests, so it's not part of you. And does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, and also, like, if you tried to, say, form your own state within the bounds of a state, right? That state will try to eliminate you, or at least your new state.
All right. Now I'm gonna push back on that just a little bit, but only in the sense of that I'm Native myself,
Okay.
Native American, and so I have these. Well, I never actually grew up on a reservation, but they are states within states. Now they were created by the state, so it's not exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now, oh, have you ever seen the documentary Wild Country?
No, sorry. I mean, I've seen lots of documentaries, but I don't remember. I don't
That's
recall
one you
this one.
should definitely check out. It's on Netflix. In the 80s, this group from India came over to America. Um, they were trying to flee from, let's call it, religious persecution, even though that's not a very accurate term, because they didn't really consider themselves religious. Uh, this individual by the name of Osho Bhagwan.
Is this the one in
Uh,
Oregon?
yes,
Okay, yeah, I've heard about this. I think I remember.
yeah, they created basically they created a city there that was actually sanctioned by the local government. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you call that? Incorporated, right? An incorporated city,
Yeah.
which allowed them to create their own police force here. So they were able to start up their own city, and it was started. Now, when they came over to America, they were using religious connotation to establish themselves, so that they realized that America has the that freedom for religions to not be persecuted.
Yeah.
You know, it's just something that we've established for ourselves here. Um, but they got pushed back in the end, and ended up losing their. Sorry, this was just more of a rambling than it was anything else. But
Okay.
I really enjoyed that documentary, and it's a kind of an example of how small, let's call it small states, can end up creating themselves within a larger state. Even if it was unsuccessful, it's still just a small example.
Yeah. What was the? I can't remember quite what happened there. Was there like a shootout or something, or
So they had like thousands of followers there, in their Rajneeshpuram is the name of the city, Rajneeshpuram.
mm,
And they the locals. So there was a small town nearby named Antelope, and had a population of less than like a few hundred, I believe. Um, they they were fighting against the Rajneeshpuram because of their. I'm going to use religion is the word I'm going to use, but only because by legal definitions that's what they were trying to uh, use to create their little sanctuary, if you will. Um, their religion had to do with sexual freedom, and
all
so
right.
they were basically persecuted by the locals in Oregon, and eventually it became violent, where a bomb was planted in one of their hotels. I don't know if anyone was injured during that, but at that point, you start seeing in the documentary that their police force for Rajneeshpuram is carrying around Uzis. Like that was their standard weapon, uh, or sidearm, I guess, if you will,
Yeah.
was Uzi, because they were afraid of and they started basically forming a bit of a militia to defend themselves. Now, there is a lot of things that are about Rajneeshpuram that may or may not be very bad, morally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But again, we're just talking about an example.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, yeah. So we were talking about states.
Yeah. So I was thinking that maybe so those states that end up in this situation, like Rajikpuram, Raji
Rajneeshpuram.
Rajneeshpuram, well, what they end up doing was having conflict with other local states. Is that sorry? Well, let's say local governments.
This wasn't government. This was actually the individuals of their town. Now, the local government did get involved with, for example, like the mayor of their of Antelope, and then eventually a full political organization, something like America First. It's not that. I don't think it was America First, but it's something like that that got involved, and they basically went to political war against Rajneeshpuram,
Wasn't
and in the end won.
Was this the one where the Purim was taking in homeless people and busing them in for votes
Yes,
and stuff?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so they were subverting the system in a sense.
To a degree, yes. But the idea is that this was all after they had already been an incorporated city. So they were basing this off of the religious grounds.
Mm-hmm.
The argument against Rajneeshpuram was on religious grounds. So I mean, it's a complicated situation, but it was that was just again just an example.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. Well, you'll find like you can also use other examples like the cartels, for example. They're sort of their own state in a sense. Parts of Mexico, the federal government doesn't even get involved there. They're completely subverted by these cartels.
Yeah,
Just
or involved in the negative sense.
yeah, yeah, or they're like complicit. Um,
Yeah,
but a lot of these cartels perform almost better than the Mexican government in terms of providing services and security for the
yeah,
people there. I mean, I don't think it's very secure. I've been to Mexico once. I don't think I'll ever go back. I'm sure it's a great country, but I just after seeing one too many horrible videos about life there, I would never go back. I mean,
yeah. I did. Oh, go ahead.
I've been to Brazil too, so I mean, I I feel more comfortable going there than I do going to um, Mexico.
Yeah, I was in Chihuahua. I did mission trips down there for 5 years in a row.
Yeah.
Um, they we were just helping them uh, build a church there for a an orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I didn't really feel unsafe there, but I was also probably one of the safer areas that I could have been at that time. Not to say that there was, uh, lots of danger in the very city I was in, but
Yeah.
it went well.
Hmm.
It was a very positive experience all around.
Okay. Um. Yeah. It's What were you doing? So you were a Christian missionary or?
I was part of. So I grew up. Started off with some Catholicism. We did the CCD classes for communion, and then later on moved to a smaller town where we became members of a Christian church. Basically throughout my high school years,
Yeah.
and that was part of that. Uh, those mission trips were part of that organization.
Oh, that's very interesting. I grew up essentially atheist, but um, I sort of look at religion differently now than I did before. I mean, maybe you did
I
too.
do as well.
Yeah.
I consider myself more agnostic than anything else.
Well, I've done some writing on this topic, like about religion. And one thing I've kind of come to I've had to rationalize it, right? Because I don't know what you call it. As an atheist, I had to rationalize it. Um, so, but but the thing is, what Peterson did for me was it kind of gave me an idea of how to look at it differently rather than look at it cynically, right? Because
Mhm.
all these billions of people that believe this stuff, like they're either crazy or I'm crazy. So I have to. So what I did to rationalize it was, okay. So what when people say when they talk about truth, right? What do they mean by truth? Um, I'm not quite certain, but I think it's narrative truth. So what I mean by
Like a
that,
personal truth?
um, no, it's like, well, it's kind of like that, but it's like so I envision us as like narrative creatures. Uh, we have a past, a present, and a future, right?
Hmm.
And that's sort of like a story, which and most stories or plays have three acts. They have a first act, second act, and third act. So it's a little bit symbolic, obviously. Um, but no one would deny that we have a past, right? No one
Hmm.
would deny that we live in the present, and no one would deny that we at least expect a future, whether it happens or not. So, given all those three sort of chapters or acts, um, it's sort of we live in a narrative. Essentially, is what I'm saying.
Right. No. Okay. So your idea of narrative truth and my idea of personal truth are more or less probably identical. Um,
Yes, probably. Yeah.
so I do understand what you're saying.
Okay, so let me go further then. So you have in your journey, which is like your story, you have obstacles that get in your way, correct?
Hmm.
And you have things that help you along your way, right? So
Okay.
so those are like those are called external. So if it gets in your way, it's an external antagonist. So it's on the outside. It's getting in your way. Like it could be anything. A rock, you fall, you trip on
Right.
a rock. It's kind of a narrative antagonist. Um, Antagonism, of course, just means something that is against you. And then
Hold on one
yeah,
second.
yeah,
I've,
no
I've
worries.
got someone asking me a question.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm on the phone. There's another office on the other side. So this is east and there's west. And so nobody's here right now, but there should be people on the other in the other buildings. It's I'm sorry, maintenance. Yeah. No maintenance here. There is maintenance here. Do you live here? Yeah, no, it's just coming for replace the carpet. I see. Okay. All right, let me call my boss and I'll get him over here. All right. Hey, I'm gonna have to let you go for real quick. I can finish this call up, or I can call you right back after I'm done.
yeah, sure, man, no problem.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
cheers.
Bye.
All right, so I'm going to just talk about other things for now, so I can fill the time. So one thing I've been thinking is that a lot of people are frozen in time and they're not moving forward with their lives. Many 30-year-olds to 40-year-olds living today don't have families of their own. They have, they're still sort of they have their families like their parents and their grandparents and their siblings, but they don't they haven't started their own families. They're sort of frozen in time and frozen in space, and um, I think it's they are afraid of making the moves that would push them forward. And I think that's because they've been propagandized to think that uh, things that are uncomfortable are bad. Things that are difficult are negative. But all that does is it leaves you frozen, leaves you stuck in the mud, stuck in the ice, sort of, so to speak. Not much, not much real good can come of it. It's basically just neutral. So, oh, he's back. Oh. Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, that was real quick, just real quick.
Yeah, no
All
worries.
right.
All right.
Do you want to do you set it back up again?
No, it's alright. I just kept it going. I started the little thing, and then I was like, "Oh, he's back," so I'll stop. um. So yeah. So
Oh no.
so ways we live a narrative reality, And so, where was I? Do you remember where I was going?
Not yet. One second. Let me. I'm against my boss here. There it is. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. So, yeah, narrative reality. So that's where truth. That's where you're at. Is on truth.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So.
so you move forward through time, and I just got to reorganize my thoughts here because I got off track.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Um. So you have a past, present, and future. Uh. Okay. So yeah. So when you're looking at your story, you're going. You have to play out these chapters, and the things that help. Okay, so okay, now I remember where we were. So antagonists and protagonists. So things that get in your
external.
yeah. So external antagonists are things that get in your way. External protagonists are things that help you on your way. But then there's other things. One of them is is that you're not just a protagonist for your own story. You're also an antagonist.
Uh-huh.
Because you can help yourself
An
along.
internal antagonist.
Yeah, yeah. So you can help yourself along your way, but you can also get in your own way. And a lot of people deny this, but it's true. You can like, oh, I'm just gonna sleep in. I don't really want to go to work. I'll call in. You know, I won't do what I have to. I won't do my duty, or I'll neglect my children, or not that you'd say that, but you know, oh, I'd rather do this than like be with my kid today or whatever.
The actions speak is what you're saying.
Yeah. So you can internalize your own antagonism. But you can also do something else, which is when you externalize your antagonism. So when you externalize your antagonism is when you blame someone else for what you do. Right? So
yeah.
So I get in my own way, and I can't accept that it's me. So I blame the person on the outside for my problem. Right? Now there are people outside that will do that to you, right? So that doesn't have to be inaccurate. But that's external versus externalized. So
right.
So then you have this externalization of the narrative antagonist, which is sort of like when you point at someone that you blame and call them the devil, let's say, right?
Okay.
And sometimes it's true, but probably it's just you, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also, but conversely, there's also the narrative externalization of the narrative protagonist, which is you project into the world goodness or helpfulness, and then that sort of reflects back on you. So, and that would be God in my explanation.
Okay, but that's still it's a human action that you're framing in the word of God.
Yeah,
like
sure.
as the word of God, right?
Well, it's the narrative figure.
Okay.
So
yeah, so more like a definition, if you will.
Sure.
Defining action, and then what we see in that action is what people would call God.
Yeah, like what's it? God helps those who help themselves.
I actually really enjoy this that sentiment. It's actually something a big part of where I'm at in my thoughts, and Jordan Peterson really helped me with putting that into context, framing it with the personal responsibility. See, in my opinion, the externalized antagonist that you mentioned is so prevalent that we don't even notice it in our own lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some people do, and I think that that we are slowly waking up to it more and more. Whether or not that's proportional with population growth, I'm not for sure, but I do feel like I am seeing it more, and maybe it has more to do with like the population.
Do you mean externalized or external? So I just want to make a differentiation.
I am specifically, yeah, I do mean externalized.
So
So for example,
externalized would be like I blame this thing, for my
yes,
problems. Okay.
yes, yes. And that's actually the heart of my um, personal philosophy, I guess. Um, so, like in our conversation we had last night, I I've got to the point where um, I keep hearing everyone talk about the oppression of the systems, whether it's economic, political, educational. It doesn't really matter which system that they're talking about, but we keep looking at it and framing it in this sense of they are oppressing us.
Mm-hmm.
They are taking our freedoms, our rights, um, and what I've come to realize is that that is not the case. In particular, like it's more that we are doing it to ourselves, and uh, we're not waking up to that. Like that's the thing that. So I just had a conversation with an individual the other day who was like, "Well, yeah, all these systems, these old systems that we had, they work, well, but now they're breaking down and not working anymore." And he's like, "Why is that?" And I was like, "Well, you answered it in your question. They were working. Like it's right there. They were working and have benefited, millions to at this point billions of people. Um, and so now like we have a lot. We had like the Occupy Wall Street movement and things of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
We look at it as these upper echelon elites that are controlling everything. And my deal is that yes, that's a real thing. It is there. They are oppressing us.
It's the
But the reality is that
iron law of oligarchy.
well, but that's where I draw the line is that the thing is that when it comes right down to it, they wouldn't have that power without our help.
Mm-hmm.
We are the ones that are supporting them.
Yep.
Like they may be creating the system that allows us to survive, which is great. I'm not against that. That's why I don't rail against capitalism um, as many other people do. I do think that it needs to be updated. I think that it's old and decrepit at this point, but
But
it
I got to
it
push back on that though, just a little
okay,
bit.
go ahead.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
why is it? What makes it decrepit and old?
Uh, let's see here. Well, when you like, so for example, I've been driving through Denver more and more, and in LA you'll see the same thing, or the tents on the sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you drive through that city, day after day, those tents are moved.
Mm-hmm.
They are taken down and moved constantly. You're not allowed to stay in that spot for days on end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we have something like a population of I want to say the numbers say something like 500,000 people are homeless in America. I would imagine that number is much higher.
I would imagine,
Um,
yeah.
and that doesn't account for uh, people that are not homeless but still suffering. Um, there are plenty of people in our poor communities that have to deal with just as much or more, uh, BS due to the state of how they live.
Mm-hmm.
I've grown up poor. I am from a poor family. I am still poor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I understand the mentality that I could do more to make my life better. I fully understand that. That's where I differ from a lot of the other people that talk about this. Um, from what I understand, most people look at this like they need to fix it for us, and that's where I differ.
Well, one thing, like you did mention the homeless tents. Where I live, there's this problem too. It's a little, even though it's Canada, it's a little less extreme. Well, one because like LA, for example, has like homeless people equivalent to the amount of people in my city. So That's to me that's just insane. But I mean, Los Angeles is a big city, so there's also that.
Sure.
It's also nice and warm there, so why not? If you're gonna be homeless anywhere,
Right.
right? LA.
Right. I
Um,
mean, the structures there do help support them in that regard.
yeah,
I'm seeing it here too.
yeah. But one of the problems, like for example, the tents get moved all the time. Um, one thing what people forget. So a lot of people on the left, I'm not saying you are, but a lot of people on the left, they look at these issues and they say everyone deserves a house, right? And I agree. I wish everyone could have a house. I don't have any problem with that. The problem is that a house takes resources and it's scarce and resources are scarce. So the left will
Wait.
claim they're not.
Hold on. Wait, I'm going to push back right there
Okay.
because you've already talked about how the resource scarcity issue is not as important. I guess is the way I'll frame that as an argument.
Well, it's just a fact.
Well, but you see, I'm pointing out a dissonance in your thoughts there. You mentioned once that scarcity is uh, not as it's not as important because we tend to rebound from scarcity issues.
Well,
But
no,
houses
I wasn't saying
have
that.
are
That wasn't my point with that. I was saying that we come up against these walls and we climb them. But like scarcity is always going to be there because as soon as you climb those walls and you have plenty, more people get created basically, and then we have the same problem. And I was just trying to say it
okay.
was a timeless human problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So houses. All right, but what about the idea that there are actually enough houses, let's say in America for Americans? Again, I understand you're Canadian, so I have to.
Yeah.
I don't normally have to frame these things this way because I'm usually
Oh,
talking about
let's
Americans.
let's 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 go with your framing America. I understand the United States enough. We can deal with this.
Yeah.
It works better for most people, anyways.
So in America, technically there are enough houses in America to house the homeless.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just by numbers, that's a thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Like that's just now would that be a truth?
Oh no, it's a mathematical fact.
Right. But the reason that they are not allowed to live there is because it requires or because those are their property. Those houses are a property of an individual or an organization or even our government itself.
Yep.
So the idea that the homeless can't have a house has, in my opinion, less to do with their. Let's hear. Where am I going with that? Maybe you can help
Scarcity?
me out. Yeah, less to do with scarcity than it does with maintaining a status quo of property. Now, that's a socialist argument, right?
Yep.
All right, and this is where I disagree with most socialists. See, as a socialist, the idea would be that the government needs to take control of those, or like some form of government, like if you want to call it an organization, fine, takes control of those properties and divvies them out towards those that are in need in a way that benefits them. Now, that's not like I'm not saying that's a bad idea, right? I'm not saying that.
I think it's terrible, to be honest.
Well, it's in the sense of like, okay, let's say in Stalin's communist regime, he forcibly took, or the government forcibly took the land from the farmers, right?
Yeah.
The farmers had their farms, and if they were moderately successful enough to have an employee,
yeah, like the kulaks,
not multiple, right? So these individuals had their property stripped from them forcibly by the government. Well, I'm not suggesting that that's the case. I'm suggesting that we already utilize many socialist ideals in our current system, including for corporations and individuals. So we already utilize some of these ideas, and they've come about over time as solutions towards problems. And that's all I'm suggesting is some form of reconstruction of how we frame the resources, the mindset around the resources that we do have available to us.
So like a redistribution to be more fair, they would
Well,
claim, right?
I mean, redistribution usually has that violent connotation where
Well,
I'm forcibly taking your property and utilizing it towards something else, right? And
when you take something
in
from someone and then give it to someone else, that is force. So you can't. It can't be. That's just a fact,
well,
right?
but that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting we take it from anyone. I'm suggesting that we have many people that are already trying to help other people out.
Yeah.
We have many people that are benefiting others through the hands of their work, whether it be uh, paid or voluntarily. And so that's all I'm talking about in that framework. I'm not talking about trying to, uphold those strict communist ideals. Like that's asinine. Like we've learned from that.
Oh, but yeah, I'm all fine with volunteerism. Basically, like I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, I think charity's probably a better way to distribute resources than, say, the state. That being said, though, if we were to, let's say there's this argument that there's extra houses and homeless people could be housed by these houses. Well, there's a number of problems. The first one is like, well, if you give a homeless person a house, they're probably going to be homeless again pretty soon, because a lot of people can't. A lot of people under certain circumstances can't handle maintaining a home. It'll be a wasted resource essentially. The infrastructure will be destroyed. Secondly, who are you going to take that house from? That person obviously worked for their house. No one gets money for free, right? Except for the government. So it has to come from somewhere. Like even Jeff Bezos, like as much as he's what do you call it, Lex Luthor, he earned every dollar he got through voluntary exchange, and he didn't have to rob it. He didn't walk up to anybody with a gun. He didn't walk into any bank. He organized or sold product, and people bought the product, and he made profit off this. I think they weren't even profitable till recently. Now he has done what I would describe as monopolization, but I wouldn't even blame necessarily capitalism for that. I would blame well, it's not really at that point yet. If he starts doing like pure monopolization, you can only blame the state because the state.
Well, what about this whole this unionization thing that was going on? Did you
Sorry, say again.
I missed that. Oh, sorry. Did you hear anything about this unionization that they were trying to pass regarding Amazon?
They failed or something. They failed the vote.
The unionization did fail, but during the time that that leading up to the voting for that unionization, the Amazon was using, and this is I can pull up the videos to say that I'm not just making this up.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, they utilized some gross tactics in framing this unionization bill.
Yeah, no, they always do. I've been a member of a union for almost my entire working career. I'm actually involved in the union, but the unions are ultimately they are coercive in a sense.
Okay, yeah, I'm not against that. And again, it's not about the unionization, in my opinion, that I'm trying to point at here. The point is more along the lines that this corporation that you call a monopoly, to an extent, right? Like not a full-blown monopoly, but to an extent, a monopoly, or monopolization, however you want to frame it. Utilizing gross tactics after forcing inhumane priorities on their employees.
Yeah. Oh, like the P breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's, they
Well,
basically it, just walking to and from your clock in station. Um, and like they have extremely strict policies on that. If you're a second late to work, you're discounted from a point system or something along those lines.
yeah.
But they're using the power of their employment opportunity to rationalize that, well, we can do whatever we want to our employees.
Well, that is true. They can try to get away with a lot, but um, I would argue that although that sucks, and I mean, the thing is they're not slaves. They can leave. They can choose different employers.
Well, but here's the pushback on that. What if their opportunities in that area are so limited that they have to take a pay cut that doesn't allow them to care for their family?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the thing with life
The
too.
monopolization.
Well, yeah. Well, that the thing with life too is that it's not really catered necessarily to you. It's catered to the market. So, I mean,
So,
you could move, for example. I'm not saying that's obviously ideal, but
or optimal.
or optimal. Um, and I think it's actually tragic in many cases. But what are we supposed to do about it?
There it is. But what are we supposed to do about it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the heart of the thing is the rubber meets the road. Now, this is what I'm talking about when I say that I'm different than most other socialists in this regard. Is that like I said, most people are looking at this like, well, what are we supposed to do about that? Like, who's supposed to fix this? Like, how am I supposed to fix this? And that's where I'm uh my gosh, personal philosophy. I don't want to use the word belief. I'm trying to
That's
I'm
fine.
trying to avoid using the
You
word.
can say belief. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I'm not gonna criticize you
Well,
for a
and it's
word.
more for others that I don't want to frame it in that regard, because I want people to understand that I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong about something. I'm willing to change my mind about something if the information skews in that direction.
Oh,
So
I guess you could say
um,
current thoughts. That works.
okay, yeah. So my current thoughts on this are that we have more control and power over things than we are giving ourselves credit for. That we should be striving for less strain on the resources. That way, the scarcity issue can't even come up as a framework of mind.
Hmm.
So the idea that scarcity is even a thing is kind of a control tactic. Does that make sense?
I'll entertain your point.
Okay. So um, my my idea would be that the government is meant to um, help the individuals of that it governs to be more self-sustainable. If we are growing our own food, collecting our own water as much as we can, I know that that's not entirely feasible. This isn't like a generalization that you would just sweep across every individual. To each their own ability, right?
Hmm.
And that's also a big part of where these conversations are kind of left off, is that when you look in regards to the homeless, many of them do not have the ability or capability to function in the current format of the systems we have in place. I mean, um, I'm kind of an example of it myself. I mean, I've always been able to work. I've always been able to have a place to hang my hat, as you'll say. Except for recently, I've struggled a little harder. But the there was always that American dream style of thought.
Hmm.
You're gonna once you work hard enough, you're gonna be able to afford a house, and you should be striving towards a family and being a good citizen. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's just a basic. Uh, I think most people would agree that that's the what our system has been set up to uh, create for us. Kind of uh,
Like allow for us.
yeah, yeah. Um, and again, this is part of what I mean when I say that's fine to an extent. It's benefited millions, if not billions, of people. I have no problem with that, but we do need to update things to some degree. We need to find a compromise that allows people to flourish, even those that can't sustain themselves in the current economic uh, or economic systems and
Well,
socioeconomic
well,
systems.
let me ask you this, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Um, when you talk about like the current economic system, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we have
I'm not trying to catch you in a
most
tongue
of
twister or
no
anything.
no
I'm
no no
just
no
yeah.
no no this is fine, this is fine. The most people realize that if they want to eat, they're gonna have to buy their food.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's many people, heck, let's call it the same amount of people that are homeless, that can actually sustain themselves without use of a job to um to live, to survive. But that's what I mean by that, is that our system set up that, well, if you want to eat, you need to work. If you want a shelter, you need to work. And again, I'm not framing that as like an all negative, all evil system.
Mm-hmm.
Like it benefits millions of people. I have no problem framing it that way. But we're letting people fall off the end. We've turned the competitive nature, which Russell Brand mentioned in that video, the competitive nature of nature, and we've put it into this economic system that we are using to support everyone. And again, I cannot stress enough that it has benefited billions of people, including myself. I can't stress enough that I am fully aware of that, and I'm not taking anything away from it.
Well, here's a question. Do you think that the system was designed, or do you think it emerged?
Uh, I mean, it's definitely both. Like I understand the emergent properties of how things come about. I mean, that's why things started off with something like a barter system and then turned into a monetary system, and continue to do so until we've come across this, newest, most uh, what do we want to call it, effective of economic systems that we have today, whatever you want to call it, capitalistic, or you know the mixture of socialism and capitalism. Like I don't think that there's much of a pure capitalist system. I don't think that that's quite a thing, but it's evolved. It's definitely evolved over time. I have no problem saying that.
Well, what do you think about the graphs? I can't remember what I think it's called. Our World in Data. It's a website, and they have these graphs that show since the markets have been made more free, that the productivity and population and all these other associated life quality of life increases and gains have like rocket shot up since
Well,
like the industrial revolution. How would
I think
it's that, because that's a
I
fact,
think
right?
that well, I mean, to a degree, there. This is where um uh so last night you were talking about this, where empiricism isn't always the right way to frame things, where statistics can be utilized to um twist twist the reality,
Yep.
twist the truth, if you will,
Yeah.
where these numbers may show an increasingly large population is benefiting uh, in these statistics.
In the
But when
material
you
sense.
start talking to but when you start talking to individuals on the street, uh, you hear most of them most people, and again, this is anecdotal. Like I'm not saying this is empirical, but most people feel some form of, like oppression, or um, something doesn't feel right. Something's wrong, and they don't understand what it is, whether it's towards them directly, or towards neighbors, or family members, or just what they've noticed in their own lives.
But do you think if you ask those people if they would prefer to live in any year uh, imaginable, like even say in the future, would they rather live further back in time or like closer to now? What do you think they would
I find it
answer?
strange. I find it strange because I've actually just been asked this question recently, and I said now, um,
But why would you
and
say, yeah,
they seem very surprised by that
yeah?
answer.
You said now. What would you think they would say?
I think that a large percentage, whether that's half, or three quarter, or I mean a third. I wouldn't want to venture a solid guess on that number,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
think a large percentage of people would state sometime in the past as being better off
But
than.
how far back do you suspect?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's the tough answer. That's the tough question there,
Yeah.
is how far back. But again, I feel like that part is subjective. Like trying to ask someone when they would want to live is more subjective. The more important fact is that they don't feel like now is their time.
Well, my argument would be for them. If they would rather not live now, um, you'd have to ask them why, and then what year, and then once they pin down a year, you're like, well, X, Y, and
Then
Z.
you can start telling them, yeah, why the reasons why they would not want to.
Well, no, I don't even have to.
Again, I'm
I
native.
I don't I
I'm
don't
Native
even.
American. I'm
Yeah.
my heritage has grown up from um, being a people that lived of the land, to a people that were shunted off into far corners of lands that they used to roam freely on, and
Mm-hmm.
are not allowed to leave those boundaries anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the story for the Native Americans is pretty uh, a sad one, let's say, in many cases.
But that's a drop in the bucket. Like when you start thinking about, I mean, there millions of Americans were, or millions of natives were killed off early on from small things like disease or warfare.
Yeah.
uh, but I mean, we've been going, if you go back this is where you're coming at with that, is that if you go back from any time from now, you're going to be dealing with this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand what you mean by that, and that's why I said it doesn't really matter what time you go back to. You could easily pull up a dozen reasons why they would not want to live in that time.
Yeah, the
You know,
giants of the
disease,
past
famine.
dwarf the future, or dwarf the present.
um Giants of the past dwarf the present.
If you think about it, right?
um
Like if you went back 100 years and lived then, would you be better off in terms of like uh, material well being?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well,
Like, I
would you
wouldn't.
have less access to food then? Would you have less access to transport and opportunity? Would you have you just look at those sorts of
Yes,
things.
the answer to that would be yes.
Yes, you'd have less access. Um, and like I don't know. I don't know if you've done much traveling, but let's say you fly to Mexico for a vacation. Let's assume it's nice.
Mhm.
Um, you couldn't really do that back then, for example. And even now, most people can't. Like a large portion of the population never travels. But my point is simply like, yeah, we can. I think we get a lot into nostalgia. Like uh, even white people, for example, they'll say stuff like, "Oh, but the 19 some not all of them, obviously, especially the lefties, they won't say this, but some conservatives they'll say, "Oh, it was better in the 50s or whatever." Other than the racism and all that stuff, it was
Yeah,
better in the
yeah.
50s. The racism is
Just don't look at
regrettable.
this part. Don't open that curtain.
this is regrettable, but these parts were good. And it's true. There's some parts that are good, right? But
and possibly even better.
possibly. But the point is, there it's probably not overall better compared to, say, more present times. Like think about this. Like
I would agree.
what was
Go ahead.
it? I was using MSN Messenger in like 2002, right?
Hmm.
Or what? How old? Just curious. How old are you? I'm 30.
I'm 35.
Oh, I'm 33, so we're almost the same age. So you remember what MSN Messenger was like, right? That doesn't even. That
I
doesn't
didn't.
even.
I didn't use MSN. No,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't use that one.
Well, everyone I knew used it, and it was pretty popular. But anyways, it doesn't even exist anymore, uh, because if you try to use it now, it'd be useless because technology is
It did
advanced, right?
right. It didn't update.
Yeah, and I remember thinking at the time, this was so amazing because I could talk to people, on the other side of the planet, like Russia, and have instant conversations with them. And like, and now I just look at that. That's just normal. Not only is it normal, it's been normal for 20 years.
Right.
Like when Skype came out, I got rid of my landline because I could have Skype, you know, for like $5 a month or whatever it was at the time. Um, and that saved me $15 a month because my landline was 20. So there's all these little innovations, and not and you know, and individually they might not make a difference, but when you add them all up, it makes a huge difference.
Well, would you agree with the sentiment that the one of the largest contributors towards any aspect of this that you and I have been or will continue to discuss is the educated state of the citizens?
Oh, I see. You see, this goes into like a lot of political theory, but I don't think my personal opinion, okay, and it's based off this idea. So you look at an apple, right? This is an analogy, by the way, just in case it's confusing. So you look at an
Okay.
apple. You look at an apple, and now imagine you've never cut open an apple, right? So you don't know what's inside. Okay. So,
Okay.
but by looking at the apple, you see, what do you see?
Red.
Yeah, you see skin, right? You just see the skin of the apple.
Right.
Well, how do you know by looking at it that it's not skin all the way through?
Uh,
Like you can't cut it open.
I would say if you the first time you're looking at it, you wouldn't.
Exactly. So imagine, imagine you're looking at this apple. By looking at it, you're like, oh, it's all skin, right? And then, so you go through life thinking, you treat apples like they're just all skin. So they're they're just this. But then when you cut it open, you realize it's like 0.1% skin and like 99.9% apple fruit or flesh, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
So this is how I imagine a person, is that what you see on the outside is sort of like the culture, right? It's like what they show to you, uh, and it's like civilized person or whatever, civilized human. But then if you below that is like the nature, the thing that they don't really control consciously. So in my view from the things I've read and thought about, I imagine that humans are mostly driven by nature, but then as Jonathan Haidt says, we post hoc rationalize our behavior after the fact. So we do a thing and then we come up with our reason. And sometimes it's immediate. Most of the time. But the real cause was some sort of natural urge. So
Okay.
one thing I think that's happening is we're subduing we're trying to, so this sort of the SJW stuff, we're looking at the skin and we're saying the apple is all skin, right? It's all the culture, it's all whatever it's all our civilized nature or civilized being is just that's what we are. And there is no nature to us. We're infinitely malleable. But the truth is, if you were to bite into the apple, you'd see like it's the fruit, right? So, so these like I would call them ideological collectivists. They look at the apple and they see all skin, but I think that's exactly backwards. So, anyways, from this idea that we're mostly nature, um, we are going to act in ways that are reflective of that rather than reflective of being civilized. So, what the reason why you can't organize the great population to sort of stand up for themselves and rebel against sort of what we maybe define as an oppressive oligarchy or ruling elite is because you can't subdue that nature really. You can only pretend that the nature doesn't exist, but when push comes to shove, as the rubber meets the road, as you say, you'll find that people don't act in that interest. They act in a different interest. Sort of
Well, I would agree. I would agree uh, to a large extent. Looking at my own life as an example, I've been having these thoughts for the past, like 6 years, when I've finally started to get myself aware of what my environment is.
yeah.
Um, and the yeah, so during this time, what I came that's what I came that's when I came up with this mentality of, well, self-sustainability should be one of the highest goals of our government right now, our highest priorities, in for many reasons. One is the to relieve alleviate some of the strain on our resources. But I mean, why would we not want a strong population? You know, able to take care of itself under, you know, uh, the stress of nature. When a natural disaster occurs, or the summer, the harvest was a poor one this year. Something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Sorry, I was actually headed somewhere,
Oh,
and
sorry.
I
Good. Good.
forgot I trailed off. But at the moment, so for example, I consider, like, living in an apartment as a box living, box style lifestyle, and I've been hearing it more and more lately from other people, like, when I watch different videos on YouTube. But it's not just about the four walls and the roof; it's about the utilities. You were boxed into this monopolization of resources. Um, it, and when you consider the implications of the entire process to getting, a steak on your plate, or an avocado, on your sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
How many hands went into the process of getting that to your plate?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how many hands went into the creation of that plate?
Yeah.
Well, I am living in the box life right now. I'm not living self-sustainably. It is an ideal, and one that I am not able to achieve yet. Now, I have come to the realization that you can't. That we People keep thinking that you tear the system down and rebuild it. Like, that's the goal in many of these for example, like socialist mindsets. When you talk to somebody who believes in something like socialist ideals, the framework is something like, well, we need to tear the system down and restart it. I'm not saying that all of, I'm not trying to generalize to that degree, though. I do, for example, Bernie Sanders would not be a part of that mindset, if you catch my meaning here.
Oh yeah, go on. It's okay.
But
Yeah.
so my personal ideal is that I don't want to. I'd like to be relying less on the infrastructure around me, and uh, relying more on my own productivity. Now, I'm
Yes.
not, again, I don't want to generalize that to everyone. Everyone has their own, like, let's say the person that lives in the apartment just starts a planter for an herb garden. Like, that's a good start. That's just a good step.
Yeah.
Starting to rely on zero waste lifestyles, where you go out with your glass jar and to the grocery store and fill it up with, the grains, or nuts or cereal, instead of buying a prepackaged box, or bag.
Yeah.
These are just small steps that most people, especially in the framework of a capitalist society that we have currently, 300 million Americans could make some of these moves in that direction that in the end, I believe, would benefit the country and in the long run globally. Now, I'm not trying to. That's not a globalization argument. I'm just
Yep.
trying to say that
Well,
in my
it's
opinion, it's
localization in a
ground
sense.
up. It's ground up. That's I keep hearing people frame this from top down. There's a lot of people that want to look at the system that we have in place and look at its flaws and say, well, that's fucked up. Sorry, I threw that
Oh,
in there.
it's fine.
The that it's well, these systems are so messed up. Let's just tear it down and start over again. And I think that's the wrong way to look at these systems.
Yeah. Well, the only problem with localization, I guess you could call it, is that a fair term?
I just want to frame it as self sustainability.
Okay, so self sustainability is like it detracts from the special the advantages of specialization. So, like, a carpenter can build all his own wood products or whatever, but if he has to go chop the trees down too, then he's gonna have to put less work into making carpentry products, right?
Well, I don't understand how that would look when I stated this as self sustainability. In no way did I try to detract from the current job and economic system. I'm framing this as if you
Yeah.
the person that I'm talking to right now and myself decided to go out and buy solar panels, which I have a portable one myself, for charging my phone, or started a small herb garden. These are things that you can do within the current framework, the current structures and infrastructure that we have around us. In these small ways, we are taking ourselves off of the strain of the infrastructure.
Sure, sure. In some ways, yes, but you're also reducing your advantage. Like, for example, let's say you're let's say you're a carpenter. You can make chairs or houses or whatever. But if you're busy chopping down the lumber to get that, then milling the lumber, well, you're reducing the amount of time you can spend in your own specialization. So
Well,
you could
again,
leave that
I
to
don't.
you could buy
I'm
lumber
not.
from a
I'm not.
lumberjack, for example.
But there's nothing wrong with that. I have no problem with that. Like I'm not quite sure what you're pushing back against.
Well, let's say, well, it just comes down to whether you can produce, for example, if you want to maximize productivity, if that's the goal, then what you want to.
It's not about maximizing productivity. No, that
Oh, hello. I lost.
I'm talking about the
Oh,
individual.
you're back.
You,
You're back.
or the person that's listening to this.
Yeah. Oh, are you gone again? Give me a.
Hello?
I can hear you. You're quite quiet for some reason. Now I hear rustling.
oh, okay. Sorry. Apparently I was getting a phone call and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, no problem.
So again, what I was saying was that I'm framing this in as I'm talking to an individual, talking to a person, and all I'm implying in the form of action is that this individual, whether they be the lumberjack or the carpenter, just relies on their own capabilities for sustaining themselves as much as possible, as much as they can. In the framework of you are still having to work, maybe you still have to work 40 hours a week. Maybe you still need to work that 40-hour job and you only have an extra, 20, 30 hours a week to maintain a garden or something along those lines. That individual may not to be able to sustain themselves 100% by their own hands when it comes to food production.
Mhm.
but they may be able to alleviate 25% of their produce needs, or something along those lines.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And that's all I'm framing, is that self-sustainability is about alleviating a small portion of your impact on the infrastructure around you.
Oh, for sure. So imagine you work your job, and as extra, you have a little garden, like like in the war, they had little victory gardens, especially in the UK. You grew some cucumbers or whatever, tomatoes, and that relieved the system of having to provide you for those goods, correct? But that does take time. So let's say you do your hours a week, but then you have to put these additional hours into that thing. Uh, and I think that's great. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually increasing the overall productivity of the system. The problem is
Now,
people don't want to do it.
oh, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry,
Oh,
sorry.
the
Go
problem
ahead.
is people don't want to do it because it's extra work.
Well, I kind of now
I mean,
here's where
I think it's a great idea, honestly, but yeah, the problem is people just don't do it.
right. Well, so the second part of where I would come at with this is that the first part is self-sustainability. The second part is educating ourselves, in regards to our political structure, and just our environment in general. So the way that it's a 1-2 punch. All right, what I'm trying to do is, if you can reduce the strain on the infrastructure, you're also taking control, or taking more control of your involvement in something like the political system. You are alleviating your reliance on a tax-based economy, in that regard. So when I say 25% of your food necessities are taken care of, well, that's 25% of taxes you aren't paying on produce, let alone maybe you aren't needing to work 40 hours a week now. Maybe you can work 30 hours a week, because the extra 10 hours that you were working, well, that was going towards that 25% decrease in your food cost, because you're now producing that food at
Oh
home.
yeah, I understand.
So
Yeah.
so you're reducing the taxation rate of the individuals, and then on the flip side, educate yourself. Now, for right now, what I mean by that is, like, for example, if you go to YouTube right now and you just start looking up um, the whatever news network you really want to talk about, a lot of them are very, they're what do you call them? What's the word? Uh, divisive, right? Many of them are divisive. But we're also, I'm noticing, and again, anecdotally, not statistically by any means, that we do seem to be becoming more and more aware of how these systems and the individuals specifically are involved with them, um, that affect us in our daily lives. So whether you want to call that woke, I feel like we are waking up a little bit more. Um, and again, anecdotally. So if you couple that with your taking control of how your taxes are, well, how much you're allocating in taxes, if you take control of that by trying to strive for more self-sustainability, as well as educating yourself on who your representative is. If I go out right now and I start asking people on the street who their representatives are, I can almost guarantee that I'm going to have maybe 1 out of 10 people, let's call it 1 out of 5 people, just to be generous,
Mhm.
would actually be able to tell me who their representatives are, let alone what that representative has done in the form of voting,
Oh, here's here,
for legislation.
so here's a question that I just have for you, just for that, on that exact topic.
Mhm.
Out of those out of those 5 people, because 1 in 5 says they know their person's name, let's say, how many of those 5 people, or say out of 10, how many of those 10 people would say they know which party was the rep was?
Oh, they would definitely 100% that I voted Democrats. I voted Republican.
But they would know which party the particular rep in their area would be, right?
Well, so that's
Well, generally.
oh, I guess I stated something different than what you were asking. So
Yeah.
whether or not they would even know who their representative,
Well,
yeah, it depends. So I framed it in the form of the when they go to vote. So if you have people that go to the voting booth, they're going to vote all Democratic or all Republican, because they're voting on party, not on policy. And your question is, would they even know if if they know the representative's name, would they even know what party they're under? I couldn't say that they would know.
my question's more like, so if I would say that more of them would know which party they voted or which party was representing their area than would know the actual individual.
Yeah, okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
because
Yeah.
the system's incentivized for parties rather than being run by individuals, because parties can gather control in groups rather than.
Well, see, but here's the flip side of it. See, I'm trying to use the framework of bottom up, and I think that it's highly undervalued. Uh, we uh, we are being too lazy in uh, educating ourselves on what these policymakers, who they are and what they're doing. It's a really simple. You can go to GovTrack, what is it, govtrack.gov, I think, or something like that, and you can look up very quickly, very easily, who your representatives are and how they voted. But nobody does that. The few methods that I have in my arsenal for that, besides the GovTrack, I love the podcast Congressional Dish. I think it's a fantastic podcast. And right now I'm listening to it's called Rising on the Hill. It's like a YouTube uh, news deal, kind of in the same vein as something like the conservative OAN, but like the Rising is actually kind of interesting in that they have two hosts. One of them's something more like a progressive Democrat, and the other one's a conservative. I imagine that most conservatives would call him something other than conservative, but he is
Does it start
a
with a
voting.
C?
Huh?
Does the other term start with a C and end in an uck?
No, I don't even know. I don't even know what they would call them. I imagine that the people that do watch something like OAN, like I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One
The
American
the
News.
the yeah. There's many people that look at like all Democrats as Satanists. I've talked to a couple individuals that 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 see anyone that considers himself a Democrat as a Satanist. And in those same people, I think if they watched this news organization, the Rising, would see this conservative host on there and call him some kind of Democratic shill. Like he calls himself a conservative, but he's definitely not a conservative in my book.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but people are gonna have lots of different views, I suppose, on the particulars.
Right. And
Yeah.
the fact that anyone's even looking at something like OAN, just I mean, it points to the fact that we are trying to educate ourselves.
I don't think so. I look at
I look at
I look at the media sort of as a narrative producer. So the media doesn't care about the truth as much as it cares about other things, right?
Well, here's what I mean by that. Hold on,
Okay.
let me get this out real quick, because
Yep.
I do see where you're going with this, and again, I want to frame this from bottom up. These people are the individuals are trying to educate themselves. I think that many of them understand very well that most of these media organizations have bias or are entirely biased, and that many of the people that I speak to, again anecdotally, many people would say that they don't know where to get their news from because they don't trust any media, or let alone, or I mean, at the very least, one or two maybe media sources that they actually trust, and that's why I stated the ones that I do trust. Um, I have been a voting Democrat for a long time, but I am very disillusioned in the Democratic Party at this point. Um, I've been leaning towards something like independent for a while, but I don't even know politically. Like I feel afloat. I don't know where to turn to right now. I do like, for example, I like the conservative um, mindset in the form of if you boil it down to just the ideas of, like, let's say, small government and conservative spending, like those two things, I don't have a problem with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the only problem is that once you start getting the narration around those, then it starts turning into like, well, conservative spending means that we aren't going to be spending on civil structures. Well, we need to put all of our spending into defense, or um what was the other thing I was saying? Oh, small government. Oh, we need small government, but we need to clear the way for the businesses, the organization, or what's corporations. We paved the way for the corporations so that they can make the lifestyle of our people better. And I think that the way that the conservatives frame those thoughts are disingenuous. Even if I do like the conservative, um, base point, the base ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I used to be a socialist prior to my current standing. Oh, are you there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I used to be a socialist. I was part of this party called the NDP, a New Democratic Party in Canada, which is
I was wondering what that was. You mentioned that, and I recognized Democratic Party, but at the time I didn't realize you were Canadian, so I figured it was like the National Democratic Party or something like
oh
that.
yeah, no, it was New Democrat Party. Yeah, they used to be called the Canadian Commonwealth Federation, which was a sort of a party that joined workers, like union workers and farmers in Saskatchewan, which is one of the provinces in Canada, in the one of the prairie provinces. Um,
All right.
I guess it's sort of like the Midwest. I don't know. I suppose.
I hear you.
So, anyways, I was really involved with the party. I would captain during campaigns, like I'd assistant captain because I was pretty young. Campaign outposts and such. Drive around, pick people up, drive them to the polls, drive around, make sure people that were identified party supporters to go vote. And I would do, when I was way younger, I'd do phone calls and stuff like that, trying to get people to vote and whatever.
Right.
But I actually ran for office at some point for a local as a socialist, and but anyways, doesn't matter. My point is, I started becoming disillusioned because I couldn't find the essential answers that I needed to the questions I had, and one of them was one of them. So I read Hayek, for example. Do you know? Are you familiar?
Not particularly, no.
Well, he wrote this book called The Road to Serfdom, and it was a critique of this book written by another guy who was a socialist called The Road to Prosperity or something. I can't quite remember the term. Hopefully, viewers forgive me. But but anyways, so the Hayek book basically it was addressed to socialists of all parties, and what he basically lays out in the book is that all socialism eventually leads to the same outcome because they can't you can't get productivity from people when you're sort of forcing equality on them. You can have liberty, or you can have freedom, or you can have equality. And if you try to give people equality, you have to, by definition, you have to take away freedom. And to give people freedom, you have to equality sort of dissolves, because the people that are better at certain things are going to rise above, as Peterson says, the Pareto distribution, and
Mhm.
and it's sort of unavoidable. But by giving people freedom, they're able to there's less barriers for them to produce, and what that does is it increases the infrastructure, and over time, as the infrastructure develops, you build and build the bottom layer of where people start, right? So you can imagine where you live right now in your exact position doing your exact job, but there's no paved roads.
Mhm.
Even if they're paved shitty, if there's no paved roads, does that make your life harder?
Absolutely.
Exactly. So you benefit from wealth that you did not create, because I'm assuming the roads were there before you were born, right? Now
Correct.
you do maintain them, but that's a lot cheaper than having to build them. So that's an infrastructure that everyone benefits from. That if you were to lose, everyone would be poorer materially. So if you want to increase, so basically, if you can divide wealth as much as you want, but all that does is just divide it. It doesn't create. So if you want to increase the very bottom, you have to increase infrastructure. And to increase infrastructure, you need to allow entrepreneurs to seek that out. Now,
Well,
the
I
government,
don't,
sorry.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, let me finish. So the government can increase infrastructure. It's possible. They do it. But they don't create infrastructure as fast as private industry does. For example, a lot of people think shopping malls aren't infrastructure, but they are. They give you another areas where you can go and buy things. Imagine if there's only one shopping mall in town, things are going to be more expensive than if there's a competing or several competing shopping malls. Um, so I mean, they also compete with other things. Like instead of a shopping mall, there might be just a store, and if the shopping mall's prices are too high, then the store will obviously have an advantage in the market. Anyways, my point is, there's all these private infrastructures that we all benefit from that aren't necessarily our creation, but they're not created by the government. But undeniably, they make you wealthier. Does that make sense?
Or at least increase your quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Well, so let me push back a little bit here because, first of all, the roads, for the most part, are very they were created through social means. Now, a private organization, a private corporation, or a private entity um, may have been the ones to lay the road down by their own hands, but that was paid for by the government. So if you take something along those lines of roads, hospitals, schools, um, now some of them are definitely privatized, and some of them definitely have a lot to do with privatization or private corporations. But a lot of those have wouldn't have been as beneficial towards your quality of life without those social or the government, creating them with the taxation that they accumulate.
well, let me give you an example, because the United States is a tough one, because they're basically the wealthiest country in the world overall. So let's look at somewhere else where it's maybe the difference is more obvious. So in Brazil, my wife's from Brazil, and I've been to Rio de Janeiro, and they have I think they have at least two main toll roads in the city. So they're run privately, and they built them as well. And they license now to manage the road. Um, I think they're called Linea Amarela, and then there's Linea Vermelha, which means like red line and yellow line, and they're private. And but they're also the most popular roads because they're actually good quality roads. Your car gets less damaged on them. They get you to where you got to go faster, and they're tolled. Um, the reason why they did this is because the government couldn't afford to build the roads themselves, so they contracted out with a deal like, hey, if you build this road, then we'll let you run it for X amount of years at profit, and then after that we'll make a new decision, right? Like they essentially lease it to them. And so they did this, and then when the lease ended, they decided to keep them private because the roads were actually better maintained and better quality. So now,
Okay.
but compared to the state roads, which are funded by the government, there's potholes everywhere. They absolutely suck. There's speed bumps everywhere. Like, you wouldn't believe the difference, right? Now in the States, it's a little bit more difficult to see because they're so wealthy that the state spending a little extra money on the roads doesn't really make a huge dent in the budget. But in Brazil, it's basically it would be unsustainable. So they've contracted out certain areas to the private industry, and
See, but when
overall,
you say contracted out,
yeah,
um, there's a payment from the government going towards the private industry, though.
no, no,
Is that correct?
no, they're what basically the private company pays the government a fee to lease the land that the road's on, and then that company maintains the road and charges a toll to customers.
So the government doesn't receive any payment or
Oh no, they get money. Now they get money, I believe, for so there's this road that exists now. The company that maintains it pays the government a fee to maintain the road or to lease the road, sorry. So they have
like the
exclusivity.
land that the road's on, basically, right?
Yeah, so they have exclusivity for tolling that road. And then they maintain it and toll the road for customers. So customers pay the company to use the road, and then they use that money to make profit and also maintain the road. And for some magical reason, this road's the best road in the city.
Okay. Well, this sounds like a system that they were able to come up with that worked out in their favor, and it sounds like something that evolved over time.
But what it does do is it does exclude people that can't afford to pay the toll.
Okay.
But because they're not paying into the maintenance of the road, so they don't get to use it. So it does exclude people, but it does also create infrastructure which moves things faster, which lowers costs for people, which does raise the very bottom up and gives money to the government to fund other programs that may be put into these poor neighborhoods. For example, I'm not even saying
Well,
that's like
it sounds like a fairly good system that's worked out in the benefit of many people and was uh, created in that mindset of benefiting the people that would be using the road.
well, it's not actually that straightforward because Brazil's government is also extremely corrupt and well, to tell you the truth, I don't think it's that much more corrupt than everywhere else, but it has its corruption. It has its corruption problems, and so not all the money goes back to say the poor people, but some should some values there anyway.
Yeah. Right. Well, look, I'm again. I don't have a problem with capitalism, right? I don't have any major discrepancies with what the socialism stands for, whether or not that's well thought out. Sometimes it's definitely not, but all in all, these systems are meant to benefit others, and I think that they're merging together. I think that socialism and capitalism have been merging uh, since the inception of the for my country at least, since its inception.
I think there's a conflation with statism. Um, so as this, in my view, uh, like for example, this is why I'm no longer a socialist. By the way, I I can't see a path that differs from what I'm about to say. Is that all socialism and all socialists turn into fascists when they realize that communism can't work. I
Right, and I would agree. I would agree with that sentiment because that's what I meant by that earlier when I was talking about that. Um, how's it? Socialism doesn't. How did I put that earlier? Lost my. But yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay. So that's why I'm worried that people that push that, or I don't want to say pushing, but people advocate for socialism. I'm not saying you do, but other people that do, is that we're gonna march and I'm not even saying that necessarily the fascism that it'll lead to will be the same as the ones we've seen in the past. I am afraid that that is probably going to happen, but I'm not saying that it will be exactly the same. Like, for example, like a lot of people look at China and they'll say it's communist, and I disagree. They'll look at Cuba and say it's communist. I also disagree. And they look at the Soviet Union and they'll say that was communist, but I too disagree. I would say that they're actually fascist.
Well, again, I feel like the same idea could be said about the capitalist system. We call it capitalist, but in the reality, it has so much interplay with other socialist ideas that I wouldn't really dare to call our economic system or most others capitalist. In the same way, in the same regard that you wouldn't quite call uh, something like those other nations you mentioned, socialist or communist.
Well, I agree that there's like we're definitely not a free market system as much as we could be, um, and I think that we are slowly turning towards socialism, but I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's going to be a very bad thing because I don't think people realize
Well,
I don't think people realize that there's like it's not a free um what do you call it? It's not there's no free lunch.
but here's where I have a little dissonance with what you're saying is that I'm hearing you say something like a totally socialist system. And I would agree with that because my mentality of this is that it's not like, okay, striving for a fully socialist system would be bad. I think you and I would agree with that. And I think that the socialism is already finding its way, through nooks and crannies of our current economic and political system. Like it's already happening, and I'm not against it. Now, to some degree, yes. Now, for example, we have things like, man, how does this work? I'm gonna botch this, I know, but okay. The corporate bailouts, like in 2008,
Yeah.
we had all of this taxation money that Americans were able to uh, put together and given to the government taxation. And then this money was turned around and helped bail out the banks on the American citizens' dime.
Well, technically they
And
did pay that back.
the banks did.
Yeah. No, all the loans were paid back, but but I agree that's a problem. But I just wanted to make that
Well,
clear.
but what I'm trying to say is that it's based off of a socialist ideal.
No,
That's a corporate bailout.
no, I don't think it's socialist. I would say it's like a monopolist, monopolist idea. I don't.
But what about just Social Security? The idea of Social Security in that socialism.
I would say it's statism. I don't want to say it's socialist. There's you could describe it that way for sure.
But do you see what I'm trying to show you that the socialist ideals are already finding their ways through the nooks and crannies. Again, and if you don't want to call them socialists, that's fine. But it's an evolution. Like to call this a purely capitalistic society would be, it's just incorrect. It's not a true capitalist society. It's not,
never
fully
was,
free
really.
market.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's my point. That's my point is that in that because it's not fully capitalistic, it incorporates some socialist ideas along with others. I'm not saying that it's just a pure mix of capitalism and socialism, and that's what we have. Like I don't think anyone can really quantify the totality of what our economic and political system is. Like we have fights over in conversations we have fights over whether or not it's a republic, a democracy, a combination of them, constitutional, like no, like we don't really have a great full definition for what the American
political landscape.
Well, there's
right?
there's only three systems. There's free, coercive, and voluntary. Those are the only three
So
possible.
this would be voluntary, right?
Well, voluntary would be like charity, for example.
Oh, okay. So it's so what would we fall under then?
Well, it would be a mix of all three, but there's only three parts. Like there's the free market, there's the coercive market, and then there's the voluntary market.
Okay, what's the coercive market then?
So coercive market would be like, I hold a gun to your head and say, "Give me money," right? And then in exchange, I give you a sandwich with white bread, margarine, and a thin slice of Spam.
Now, if I instead of that being an individual, could you frame that in the economic system?
Okay, so I tax you and then give you things in return, a partial return on your taxes in terms of material well-being.
Oh well, that sounds highly like what we have.
Yes, and I'm trying to frame that in the worst possible way.
Right. Well, I mean, because again, it's not like it's 100% any one of those. It's a mixture of all of them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And volunteer would be like, I make a lot of money and then I give stuff to a charity or I give stuff to an individual, and that helps their material well-being. And then maybe they do the same to me in some sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, like for example, you have an employee that you help with some form of like housing. I've seen it here in the resorts.
Well, I don't know if that
they can provide employee housing.
I don't know if that would be voluntary. That I would just consider that part of your wage package in a sense.
So it's like it's more along the lines of the coercive.
Wages I would say would be free. Because you could choose not to work there, and they could choose not to pay you, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
Charity's more like you know how like you give to like donate to a charity, right? Like no one's holding a gun to your head and make you do it. You do it for some other reason.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Free market's like, I want X, you want you're willing to give me X for Y, and so I do Y for you, and then I get X. That's just voluntary, because I could choose not to do it, and you could choose not to do it, right? The only way any economic interaction happens in a free market is if both parties that are party to it agree. And also, it will only happen if both parties have something to gain from it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Like, for example, let's say, you've probably seen, I'm assuming you have Facebook, but like there's Facebook Marketplace, right? So someone puts a car up on Facebook Marketplace for $2,000, and then I message them and say, okay, I'll give you $1,800 for the car, and they say, well, it's $2,000. How about $1,900? And I go, okay, that's fair, right? So I get the car for $1,900. Now, if I didn't think the car was worth $1,900, I would stick to my guns and say only $1,800, and they would stick to their guns and say either $1,900 or $2,000, and then no deal would happen, right? So, and the only reason I would accept the deal is if I thought it was worth the extra $100 or whatever for the car. Then I.
Right. So that's a great example of the free market work.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
the thing is, the world's not perfect, right? So like, there might only be a limited supply of cars. Ideally, I'd pay $0 for the car and just get a car for free. But.
Right, and like, so I definitely would like. So have you heard of the resource-based economy?
Go on. Maybe.
There's let's see here. I'll have to pull it up on YouTube. It'll be a lot easier to.
This is like the exchange of resources.
As a matter of fact, just type in Joe Scott Venus Project.
Sorry, that was really muffled.
Oh, sorry. Go to YouTube and type in Joe Scott Venus Project.
Again, it was extremely muffled.
Oh no! 1 second.
Yeah. I'm just loading up the YouTube right now.
My
you see Joe?
Joe Scott.
Okay, what was the second word?
Joe Scott,
Joe Scott?
and then Joe Scott is the name.
Yeah.
And then the Venus Project.
Venus?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay.
So this is him talking about the resource-based economy of different than any of the other ones that we've really ever seen. And it's kind of utopian. You know, I definitely wouldn't deny if someone looks at that and says, well, that's just a utopian ideal.
Well,
You're not wrong.
It's just infrastructure, right? Like all what this would require is a whole lot of infrastructure input.
Well, to an extent, but it's also alleviating the necessity for wage basic.
Well, I mean, your wages would just become the material goods, I suppose.
So again, I'm not even well versed on this myself, but it's just, again, this is an example of a difference that we've probably rarely ever seen historically, if ever.
Well, I mean, it just seems like he's kind of rehashing the same old system we have, which is like you produce, and then that becomes a unit of value, and then you exchange that unit of value for other units of value. I mean, it's a cool idea, but
I think one of the things that is lost in that is that you don't have taxation at that point.
No taxation. Oh, well, I mean, the governments always find a way to tax you. They'll just take they'll just take your sheep or something like that, or they'd be like, oh, your taxes are 5 pounds of wool every month, right? They'll find a way.
I mean, it depends. I don't know how the system would look myself, but again, it was just an example. I was just pulling up an idea.
Yeah.
And so, like, as an ideal, like, I wouldn't be against moving towards something like that. It's about my framework is on the resource. So in a social mindset, it's about the labor, right? You're being divorced from your labor, and people are benefiting off of that, and that's kind of the socialist mindset.
Oh, do you know about the idea of time preference?
I don't think I do.
Oh, okay. So do you know about the? Just wondering if you can fix your mic because it's really fuzzy on my end. So and that's going to be on
maybe I must be losing battery on this one.
Okay, sorry. Well, let's deal with it then. So.
Oh, no, hold on one second. I just got to switch.
Oh, yeah. Whatever happened there is much clearer.
Hold on. Okay, does that sound better then?
Oh, 100 times.
Okay, it was the battery.
Oh, okay. So imagine. So do you know about the socialist labor theory of value, or?
More or less. Yeah.
So their theory basically is you have your labor, you add material, and then that creates, then the owner or the employer takes that product and then sells it for a profit, and that profit is worth more than your labor plus material, and the cost of the machines, that the wear on the machines or whatever, right? So they're saying that this is this. So when he makes the profit, what that is, they're saying that's your surplus labor value, and they're robbing you as a worker of that because they own infrastructure that the means of production that they have for some reason unjustly. Correct? That's basically the theory.
Yeah, they own those resources, the means of production.
You're coming in and out really badly. Oh, there you go. Are you there? It's can you talk? Oh. Are you there?
I am here, yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's try this. I've been doing this with only one one earbud in the whole time. I'll try two. Let's see if that works.
Okay, yeah, it's just really quiet at the moment, but it was louder there though. Oh,
Good, good.
okay.
Right. So, yeah, what was this called again? The value labor.
Labor theory of value, or it's just like the socialist idea of how you're robbed of your labor or alienated from your labor. They say.
So, my uh, again, my personally, I keep coming back to the fact that when most of these conversations.
Hey, just this what seems to be happening is you go loud but then go quiet. I don't know what's going on, but
I mean, maybe I have to switch off to something else. I don't know. So it sounds okay right now.
it sounds quiet right now,
Okay.
and it sounds
Weird.
medium right now.
Weird. Must be. Oh, you know what?
Now
I wonder if it's like noise cancellation.
Now it's really loud.
I think it has to do with noise cancellation. I think because I'm outside, there's wind,
Okay.
and it must be trying to like compensate for that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
whatever you're doing right now, it's working great.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So again, I keep hearing these conversations framed from a top-down approach, and while I definitely believe that the top-down approach is going to be partially necessary, I think that the mindset is that it's strictly got to be top down. And I don't agree with that. I think that we are not doing enough to educate ourselves on a bottom up approach.
Well, let's get back to that the labor theory of value thing. What do you think that so the socialist presentation of it, does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Oh.
It makes sense, but it doesn't. The framework behind um, labeling it in this way is seems to be just more like a statistical framework. When you look at it that way, it's not good or bad. It just is.
What if I told you, or if I could prove to you that the labor theory of value actually is in contradiction with the laws of physics?
Okay, go ahead, explain.
Okay, so I mean, you don't have to believe it. I'm just gonna put that out there, let you entertain the thought. Okay, so so when you take your labor and you mix, so your labor has like there's a physical limit, right? You don't exert magical labor, right?
Right.
And then you have material goods, and they're physical, and they don't create magical value just because you change them. They might become more valuable, but you input your labor to something and it'll have this, it doesn't create magical energy or whatever, right? So
wait, hold on though. What about like Elvis's guitar?
well, that's a little different, but I mean, in the market of material goods,
All right. When it comes to productivity, when it comes to productivity,
when we're speaking purely of material value, because you could put spiritual value or whatever on things, right? Like you might have a peace pipe, right? What's a peace pipe? It's just a pipe, but for certain ceremonies, it's more valuable, right?
Mm.
So you have a material value, and if you're a materialist, like what socialists claim to be, then you can't create magical value out of this material. So you take your labor input, and then you take your material value, and you make a product, and that product is sold for higher than its material value and labor value, right? But what's actually happening here? So then they're saying you're being robbed of this profit, essentially. But what's actually happening is you have an immediate need for capital as a worker, because so what you do is you say, hey, I'm gonna sell you my labor at a cost so that I get paid right away, and it's up to you after that point to make a profit on this. I just take my money and go do whatever. So you get your material, you get your money, and then you go and spend it because you need to buy food, you need to buy shelter, you need to do other stuff. and the owner or the employer, he has to take that product that's finished, the material product that's finished, and then market it and sell it at his own risk as well, because he might not sell it, right? It's a risk. But
Right.
he's paid you ahead of time, so you already got your money, and he goes and sells that. And if he doesn't make a profit, then obviously this market will collapse. So he has to go out and sell it, and he makes his profit. Now that's time delayed. He has. So essentially, what happens is it's not an exchange of magical value appearing. It's you take your short time preference plus your labor plus the material, and with that you form a product. And because the employer has a longer time preference, we call it, he's able to delay his gratification, which you didn't because you got paid right away. And he delays his gratification, and that's where his profit margin, along with his risk margin, is that's where he gets his value from. That's where he makes his profit. So in the equation I've just given you, there's no magical value that's created at the end. It's just we've taken the entire input of the calculation and put it in, and it's because there's this differentiation between how much you value you having your money right away versus how much the employer values waiting for his profit. He's delaying consumption in order to profit. Now, this comes down to this idea of ceteris paribus, which is just all things being equal, which basically just means you're isolating for a single variable, right? So, all things being equal, do you prefer to have $1 right now or $1 tomorrow?
I mean, wouldn't it be
all things being equal? So there's no other things are involved. It's just, do you want the dollar now or do you want it tomorrow? Which you prefer?
That's a really loaded question because, for example, right now I work two jobs. I work a groundskeeping job that's I'm paid like every week with that one.
Yeah.
And then I work DoorDash. So right now I could really use my money. It's wrapped up at the moment because I my information was stolen recently and I had to replace my cards. I would really like to use my money right now, but I'm okay with the idea that I'm gonna have to wait for it because I know that I'm also saving some money.
Yeah.
So that's a legitimate thought that I've had before this conversation.
Yeah.
So I would say,
well, everyone has this. Everyone has this, but I'm just saying, like, isolating for this particular thing. But everyone has delay consumption and they immediately consumption. Everyone has this sort of playing in their head.
Instant gratification.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Sometimes
no,
it's no
I definitely
choice,
understand.
right?
Right. Yeah, no choice in the matter. This is how the system works. This is what I have to deal with. I might as well get my money now.
Okay, exactly. So now, but we can change the calculation, right? So if you could take $1 today, right, or $1.50 tomorrow, that might change your choice.
Absolutely.
Now, so what's that tell you? Well, it tells you that you value your time. And there's going to be a value. Okay. There's going to be a specific value for the time difference. So, if it's just a day, maybe 50 cents doesn't matter. But if it's a year, maybe it's $5. Maybe you're like, well, I'll wait a year for get an extra $4. You know, and maybe you won't. You're like, screw it, I want a chocolate bar right now. I'm freaking hungry.
Yeah.
So, as you can see, but that proves that the labor theory value is wrong because you value time differently than other people, and that's why you might spend your time gardening to make your own vegetables instead of you might value your time less than, say, someone that goes out to the store and just buys the vegetables because they're like, screw it, I'll just pay the extra money, you know. But that means
right.
But that technically speaking, that means that person values their time that they would have spent doing the vegetable garden stuff more than doing the vegetable garden stuff. And you, if you want to do a vegetable garden, would value doing that more than spending your money at the store.
Well, here's a question then. I mean, does that mean that that individual that spends his money at the store and saves time by doing so, are they divorced from the time that it took to earn that money that they spent at the store?
It depends, right? Like maybe they earn more money at their job that they normally do that they don't they don't feel like they would rather spend their free time doing something
Well,
other
what
than
I'm
growing
suggesting
groceries.
here, though, is that both of these people are valuing their time.
Yeah, it's just in different ways.
Right.
Yeah, so that I mean that you do, that's what I mean. You have a value for time, and it'll differ based on your task. Like some guy might want to play hockey, and he'll spend money to play hockey, right? But then another guy wants to play
Yeah.
basketball, and he'll spend money playing basketball. But the one playing hockey won't spend money playing basketball or time, and they would actually see that as a negative, and vice versa.
I mean, I don't know if I would agree with that.
Well, if you prefer,
I love playing
well, if you could,
video games,
yeah, sure.
but
Yeah.
I work my job because I know that it allows me the opportunity to spend more time on video games, because I don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about things like, buying my groceries, or I mean growing my produce, because I just can go pick it up at the store now.
Exactly. So, again, uh, you do certain things so you can do other things, basically, right? Like you work because you know that's going to enhance other things that you can do. No one work. Otherwise, why would you work if you got everything given to you? Like, what would be the point?
Well, see, but um,
If it wasn't work, you'd volunteer to do
I mean, yeah, actually, I mean, honestly, yes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like for example, I'm walking around this city right now, and like I'm doing a groundskeeping job, that I'm being paid for, but at the moment, like I'm half a step away from going to pick up a picker from the store, so I can just walk around and start picking up trash.
Mm-hmm.
Like I haven't started that yet, and I'm which is kind of almost feels hypocritical to say that I want to do this when I haven't started it yet. But I would like to volunteer my time in that way.
But also, you know, but yeah, which is great, you know. If not you, then who?
Well, that's what I'm saying is I just gave somebody a thumbs up on my way to lunch today because he was picking up trash. I gave him a honk and a thumbs up.
That's
Like,
community.
I
That's
mean,
community, man.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that this idea that nobody's going to volunteer or nobody's going to work, uh, try and produce anything because jobs aren't available or around, I think is kind of silly. I think it's kind of a silly notion that well, okay, you're provided everything, so now you're not going to work anymore. Yeah, some people are going to be like that, but not everyone.
But the thing is, you want to incentivize like, as much as you want to dissuade people from being unproductive, right? You want everyone to be productive because it makes everybody's lives better.
Right. It provides meaning, which
Also,
is
yeah,
seems to be an innate desire in humanity. Like we want to feel needed and useful. Like it's almost an innate part of humanity.
yeah. No, I agree. Um,
But that's the part that I feel like people are being disingenuous about when they say that okay, well you're giving out these stimulus checks, which means that people aren't going to want to work because they've got the money they need to survive.
oh, I've seen this like firsthand.
Right, and I'm not saying that's not there. That like, okay, well, yeah, nobody, yeah, no, shoot, they're getting their stimulus check, and now everyone is doing something creative and productive with that money, right? I'm not going to say that because I know that's not true. Like
Well,
you just stated, you've seen it,
well,
but it's on the same flip side of the coin. I keep hearing the disingenuous argument that when everyone starts getting that stimulus check, everyone is going to just clock out. Like
well,
they're
well,
just done.
well
They're not
let's assume
work.
let's do the steel man, and let's assume that everybody does productive things of some sort or measure, right? It's just going to be subjective with that money, right?
Okay.
Um, the problem still remains that it's still not as efficient as a system that is based on incentives. Now, as for the stimulus, I think it's totally legitimate because the government's the one that decided to say, "Hey, you can't work."
Right,
The
right, right. I understand what you're saying.
the
Yeah.
government coerced you, so I mean not necessarily you, but other people, to not work, and I think that's probably deserving of compensation because you've been uh, physically denied or coerced into your position, right?
Okay.
So in my mind, that's not socialism. That's compensation for statist coercion.
But in a pure, like, let's say that was it was a purely capitalistic society, would that still, like, see, this is where I come to, is like, it's like flip sides of the same coin. Just like the Republicans and Democrats are basically the same people with different colors. Like, it's in my mind, like, if you did the same thing under a socialist, deal, you'd have this stimulus package that the government handed out because, hey, look, we're going through something rough right now, and we need you to just not be out and about. But it'd be the same idea it's the same thing that we just had happen. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't a purely capitalistic idea to just hand out, a stimulus package to the American, to the American people, or whatever country it's been done in. um that's not a purely capitalistic ideal.
Yeah. No. Yeah. For sure.
So, like, this is where I like I I I can't stress enough that we need to be looking at this from the ground up, from
Well.
the bottom up. And what that means is it's you, the individual. You are responsible for your part in, where you spend your money. When you spend your dollar, you are being much more democratic than when you go vote,
Oh, I agree
in my
completely.
opinion.
Yeah. Totally. I agree.
And that's, I feel like we need to wake up to that at a much higher level. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing people, like, they're finally coming around to the idea, and, like, they'll spit it out as just like this one little blurb, just a little sound bite, like, um you're supporting this or supporting that, or, but it's blown over because we keep thinking about these things in these grandiose terms of socialism, capitalism, politics. And the reality is, it's the individual, and we aren't doing enough to understand our relation to all of these systems that we are a part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's well. One argument would be like under a pure capitalist society, uh, which has never existed. Um, the lockdowns would have been essentially illegal because you can't coerce people to stay in their homes. Um, no, I mean, but then again, that just doesn't exist. So what do we do? But at the same
Yeah.
time, one thing I find kind of strange nowadays is like the how people sort of worship expertise, right? Have you noticed this?
I've been hearing about it, and I understand the sentiment behind it, but, um, and I would say, for a majority of the population, um, they rely on it to some degree or another. Maybe not. I wouldn't say in any entirety, but yes.
Well, my point would be, so if you look at like, well, let's look at I don't know, a virologist, right? Now
Okay.
we're supposed to rely on that person or group of people for dealing with this COVID thing. Uh, but the but here's the measure people look at. They look at their knowledge compared to the other person's knowledge, the expert's knowledge, right?
Okay.
And the gap is actually very high. You know, my knowledge might be say 1 out of 10, and theirs is 10 out of 10, right?
Or 9 out of 10,
Or 9 out
to
of
be
10.
fair.
Or let's say 8. Let's say 8 just to be say it's average
Sure.
expert 8 out
Sure.
of 10. So their expert knowledge is 8 out of 10, and mine is 1 or 2. Maybe yours is 1 or 2 or 3. But the actual corpus of the knowledge in terms of virology is like, let's say, out of 1,000, right? So
Right.
so
Right. Right.
so they're four. Let's give them. Let's say they're 20, right? They're really experts. They're 20 out of 1,000. But compared to me, that's more than 10 times the knowledge I have, or 20 times the knowledge I have. But the corpus is really like 1,000. So it's true. Experts do know a lot more than me. It's true. They know a lot more than an intermediate, but they don't know anything compared to the corpus. So really what you're doing is you're throwing faith sort of into like a priesthood that really understands a portion of like sort of the holy texts in a sense, but the reality is that the holy texts are like massive, because
Well,
science is
then let
unending.
me ask this then.
Yep.
What's the alternative to that?
Instinct. Right.
So would you ignore the historical context to it,
Well,
or is that instinct with historical context?
well, the thing is, we're evolved creatures, right? As long as I'm assuming you believe in evolution, or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
At least, at the very least, you could put it in this terms: a linear, a linear being.
Yeah,
You have to travel forward in time.
yeah. Okay, so we have so we're this creature that's like let's say a billion years old if you look back far enough. But for human terms, we could just say 200,000, right? Oh, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so let's say humans are 200,000 years in development, modern humans. That's a lot of knowledge that we're not really acknowledging with the scientific method. And I have a survival instinct, and in my interest, I will take all the information I can at hand and make a decision, right? So, for example, the COVID vaccines. Everyone's like, "Oh, you got to get the COVID vaccine, right?" This nearly untested, or tested very short periods of time, and we're relying on these experts that have a 20 out of 1,000 knowledge to guide us in this endeavor. I'm not trying to discount how important they are, but
right. No. You're using it as an example, and I'm following you.
yeah. So they are very important in terms of what decision I make, but then I look at other data that's like, okay, well, let's say the survival rate of COVID for the average person of my age group or our age group is like 99.99 something percent, right? From what I remember. Now, if you're older, it's different. You get way less survival. If you're overweight, you get less survival. If you have some illness, you get less survivability. But for my specific age group, it's like basically a sure deal that I'm going to survive this thing if I get it. But there's this push to get everyone vaccinated, right? Now I'm not against vaccines. I'm totally in favor of getting vaccines against diseases that are serious.
Let me jump in here.
Yeah.
Let me jump in here real quick because I think I can kind of frame this a little bit. It's risk analysis.
Yes.
You're judging whether or not doing something in the moment is going to benefit you later, or if holding back to find that research is going to strengthen or weaken the position you have.
Exactly.
But the thing is that these experts aren't just using the instincts that you're talking about. See, now this is what you're talking about, using your instincts as in with historical context. That way you make the best decision you can in the moment. But the difference is that these experts are researching the historical context. Like, they're researching the statistics. For example, your age group may have that 99% survival rate, but the idea of vaccinating you as an individual is about increasing the probability for herd immunity. That way we can save the lives of someone that may be elder or at a higher risk for the disease. Well, it's not about just saving you as the individual. It's about the context, for the future as well. Depends. So this is why the experts might have value. Like, they're not just taking your experience. They're taking your experience in the context of a society. Like, yeah, that's why you would look at it in that way.
Well, my point would be, let's say I get the vaccine, then 5 years later, right? It turns out that the vaccine has sterilized me, right? Now, as an individual, that would be completely tragic. but the cost
Mhm.
to the society is nil. So I have a different. So I could have. So because I don't know and I'm relying on experts, what are experts worried about? They're worried about the society, right?
Right.
So they're not. They're explicitly not in my interest because they have to worry about the society. Now, no one's going to worry about me except for me. So I have to make a decision on my own. And given my personal risk, maybe I wouldn't get the vaccine because I'm worried about problems further down the line that the experts haven't discovered yet.
Well, I mean, we're in this particular um, the context of this is fear and risk analysis. So, for example, I got in my car and drove to work today. The chances of me getting a car wreck within 5 miles of my house statistically are extremely high. So should I make the judgment that maybe I should just walk to work instead? Like this is it's more beneficial for me to drive to work because it's a quicker deal. But it's just risk analysis.
Yep.
Now all we're doing is in the idea of the expert in this case is just ratcheting that up to incorporate the population, not just the individual.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that you shouldn't make decisions for yourself, but why should we not try to be more informed about a situation? That's why I like, for example, I don't just listen to my podcast and The Hill. I do listen to other news sources as well, so that I can hear information from the other side. It doesn't mean that I'm going to take all of their information, to full heart on any one of those news agencies that I listen to. In the same way, I don't suggest that anyone should be listening to the experts and say, well, he is 100% right. I'm going to listen to everything he says. And I don't think that's what anyone is really doing. The people that are saying that we're relying on the experts I feel like are being a little disingenuous towards what they're trying to accomplish. Like maybe there's a bias there, but for on the expert's part. But that's why you don't listen to the expert, and believe 100% everything they say. You make a risk analysis with the information that they've provided you.
Yes. And I would say for that, that's what I would be doing by saying, okay, well, my risk of dying is really small, and the risk for this other option is unknown. Um, at least in terms of more long time outlooks.
But
Because
you don't know either one of those are true yet. Now,
well, you know,
maybe
it could be
maybe the
fine. Yeah.
risks are higher. Maybe the risks are higher because you're putting a chemical in your body that you don't know if you can trust, or historically putting chemicals in your body can be lethal. But on the same side, maybe that chemical that you just put in your body, which, by the way, all food and drink is literally a chemical.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to use chemical in the regular term of like, well, chemicals are bad.
No, no,
Like chemicals are chemicals,
I'm
and,
pretty
and
well
chemicals
versed
can
in.
be good or bad.
I'm not a chemist, but I'm involved in chemistry.
Right. So maybe putting this chemical in your body is going to reduce the uh, chance of you getting a more lethal version of that virus that mutates in the next couple years. I mean, they're already talking about it mutating. Again, I don't know if I believe that that's what's going on, but I'm hearing the information and I'm going to take it as information and make a risk analysis with that information.
Well,
So
that's another thing too. Like I've looked into it, and it's like apparently this virus mutates every 10 hours inside of a human body. So, um, that means like every time a person gets it, there could be multiple new strains developing, and most of them are probably going to fail. But multiple new strains across lots of different bodies, you're eventually going to have one that's, like the Brazilian variant or the UK variant, right? This
right. So again,
spreads.
the vaccine may be preventing people from getting a virus to begin with, which, if that is the case, if one person gets a vaccination and does not receive any of the virus after that, then that's 100% of a new strain that is denied.
Well,
So
that could be true, but if the vaccine only covers a very limited range of strain, then it's useless against the others. And then,
well, but that see, but what I'm saying is like you're eliminating a large amount of mutation by denying a purchase for the virus to begin with.
well,
But again,
here's how I
none
was
of this matters. Like we're talking specifically about something that you and I are not well versed in. We're talking about
well,
a virus that you and I only have, media coverage,
oh well,
to rely on here for information.
well. Here's one. Like I was listening to a virology expert that is like in the counter narrative as well. So I've looked at both sides. The counter narrative is something like you have a immune system and it's broad spectrum, right? So it can handle all different sorts of infections, right?
Okay.
But when you get vaccine, the vaccine is very, very good at stopping, informing your body to produce antibodies against the specific variant, right? And so it does its job very well at that specific thing. But what it does, it expends a lot of your immuno energy, like the resources for your immune system, on sort of creating antibodies for that variant. Because as soon as you get the vaccine for that, your body starts producing that to defend against it because it thinks it's under attack. But what it does is because it expends so much of the energy generating antibodies against that, it reduces its spectrum broadness. So it narrows its sort of effectiveness spectrum against other infections. So subsequent variations of COVID might even affect you even more harshly because your immune system's sort of now geared towards a specific strain, right?
Right. Okay. So let's backtrack a little bit here because again, we're getting really deep into the coronavirus itself, and where we started with was experts. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not for sure where experts came into this to begin with.
Well, I was just basically saying experts are like the priestly class of say modern times.
Well, I feel that in that regard, I mean, as long as we can try and hopefully educate people enough to think for themselves, then you kind of mitigate the worshiping of individuals' information in the priesthood you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, that's the thing too. Is like once a narrative starts on how to do things. So one way people describe this is scientism, where it's like, yeah, it is a priestly class, and yeah, you follow what the priestly class says because that's how you're gonna get to
Yeah, but
the
why?
heaven.
Why are they doing that?
Well, it's because
It's worked because it's worked.
no, not necessarily. It's
Yeah. All right, all right, all right. No. We've talked about this already, actually. Um, why does the capitalist system work? Because it's been working. It's the same idea. Like we've benefited so much. Like our population has got to this size through the use of that same force that you're talking about there.
well, it has to play with it has to do with this. Have you heard of the term normalcy bias?
No. Oh yeah. Wait. Normalcy.
I talked about last night of
So
it, but
the more people think or talk about something, it becomes normal. Is that
oh
or
no,
normalized, right?
not quite. It's like if you
Okay.
it's like you have an expected outcome, and so you have an expectation, and that's your normalcy. So like if you expect it's going to be sunny in the summer, then that's a normalcy bias, right? It could not.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be sunny in the summer. It could be really cloudy, but the normalcy bias is that it's sunny.
Okay. Keep going.
And you could have all this empirical data that says every July 4th, wherever we're in a particular location, it's always sunny. So then you look at the empirical data, you say it's going to be sunny on July 4th. You're making a prediction, but what that prediction is actually just a normalcy bias because you're saying, well, based on all the normal things, we're going to say it's going to remain normal. But the thing is, like, that's a bias because things aren't always normal, you know. So
Well, but I don't understand. I don't understand. Okay, so here, let me jump in then because in the tornado belt,
yeah,
you can get something like a 15-minute warning when the tornado's coming.
Yeah.
That came about through this. Like, it saved lives.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So a hurricane that hits a coastal city has we have a better chance of defending ourselves against that killing us because we have advanced ourselves through that knowledge, through that
Yeah.
science. What would you call it? Scientism.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's empiricism. But like, let's for example, right? You see a tornado. Well, you see a hurricane. You can see it on the radar, so you see it coming, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So imagine you're on a train track and you can't see the train coming till the last second, right? You're
Okay.
gonna get hit by the train if you're hanging out on the tracks. But if you have a camera that's way down the road and you can look at this TV screen and it says, "Oh, a train's coming in 15 minutes," well, you can get out of the way. But that's not empiricism. That's just you're seeing the train coming because your view's more accurate, right? You can.
No. Okay. Hold on. But what you're not realizing is that one, the camera had to be invented. Two, you had to have the camera on your person ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because you knew you were going to be on the tracks. Three, when we come to the idea that a hurricane, that we're seeing a hurricane, hours or minutes ahead of time, like that came from studying a system that is so damn chaotic we can barely predict it, a day in advance.
Yeah.
Like it's taken thousands of years to be able to predict these things.
Well, not
to
thousands,
a rate that,
not thousands, like 150.
yes, literally thousands of years. And like we had people that could weather watch thousands of years ago, but the intricacy of being able to apply a warning to a large population ahead of time has exponentially grown through that scientism that you're talking about.
Well, I don't know if it's not scientism. That's just like logic, right? Like if you know.
But we
there's a
had to
risk.
listen to an expert. We had to listen to somebody that's been studying this. So again, like I don't understand. Like I just don't understand.
Oh, what? Like that experts aren't perfect? Like, that's all I'm saying.
That experts aren't perfect.
Well, let's say,
I mean,
let's say the hurricane's coming and the expert says it's coming and then it comes and it destroys everything, but you got that warning, so you got out, right?
or no, let's say that they're wrong. Let's say that the expert says it's coming and a bunch of people packed up their shit and left. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. And then it leaves.
Boarded up their business and lost out on thousands of dollars they could have been making that day.
Yeah.
Because the meteorologist was wrong.
Yeah.
Well, but the idea is that was a possibility, and had it come through there, that would have saved thousands of lives.
Yeah.
Now, over time, that means that thousands of lives were saved, even because of the fact that, hey, we're gonna give you a warning, we're gonna let you know. Now you get to make a decision whether or not you're gonna pack up your stuff and go.
Yep.
Because there are still hundreds, if not thousands, of lives that are lost, even when they do know that something's coming. So yeah, I mean, it's a toss up between all of that, and the reality is that you have to make your own risk analysis as an individual.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I'm worried about though is that ability to make your own risk analysis is going to be robbed from individuals.
How?
For example, I mean, luckily, I think this is getting pushed back, at least in the States. I don't know about Canada yet, but the vaccine passport thing, right?
Okay.
That you need a passport to travel. Now, that seems kind of reasonable, but then you realize that is a curtail of your liberty. And then they're also thinking of expanding it so that you need to go to the grocery store. And a lot of people support it because they're like, well, I want to know that when I go to the grocery store, there's not a bunch of sick people there.
Well, but are they wrong?
Yes.
Why?
Because the vaccine doesn't protect you against all the different illnesses. It only protects you against the strain.
But now I'm listening to an expert tell me that the vaccine doesn't. You see what I'm saying? Like you don't
even need to be an expert though.
You
don't even need to be an expert. You just need like a tertiary knowledge.
I don't know that the vaccine is going to cause me more harm than good. I don't know that.
But you don't know
I can't tell you that.
But you don't know if it's gonna cause you more good than harm.
I agree. That's what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm not going to listen to you tell me, hey, don't take the vaccine because the chances are you're going to be worse off like I'm listening to both sides.
Oh,
I'm
no, I
listening to
agree.
both sides.
No, I
Yeah,
agree.
but that's what I'm saying is that this idea that the experts, we have these experts that are trying to force us, and then oh no, even more than that, our legislation is utilizing the words of the experts to create something. We push back against that.
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
whole reason Jordan Peterson became famous in the first place, was that he was fighting for the freedom of speech.
No, I think we agree on this, actually, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
I don't think we have any
I do.
disagreement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you and I have different views on the vaccine and the virus itself, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that the way we analyze the situation and make a choice on it, and then uh, uh, enforce that view in the world around us in regards to, like, hey, you can't take my freedoms because of some BS reason. Like, I feel that many people are pushing back against that. Now we let the fear control us here in America back in when the Patriot Act into order. The Patriot Act allowed many of our freedoms to be taken from us.
Yeah.
And that probably radiated out from our country to where many other people lost freedoms, whether that be a military action, or that was resulted in because of the freedoms that were granted to the military by the Patriot Act. So these things do happen, and we do have to fight them when they do arise. And I mean, it's just the only thing that we gotta the only way I look at it is we're so this is kind of sums up the whole conversation in my estimation.
Hmm.
Is that hold on, I want to make sure I get this wording correct. Give me one second.
Yeah.
um the responsibilities on the individual. Now, there are individuals that can't care for themselves, though, and we aren't. I don't feel like we're doing enough to, like, if we're going to sit here and argue about, the legislation that takes away our freedoms. Well, the legislation we do have has already taken many freedoms from thousands of people that are currently homeless, that can't, thrive in the current format that the system has imposed on them.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah. Well,
so our
one of the problems is we create all these barriers for these people that are artificial,
right,
right? And I think that
right.
if it was left to the market, these problems would be solved, because no one wants, like, well, as long as you want to have a home, you're going to do what you need to do it to have one, and people are
No, no,
going
no, no,
to
no. Hold
sell
on, hold on, hold
services
on,
to you.
hold on, hold on. So, well, stop. Because when you say that, the market's going to care for it. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so the market is so regulated right now that if it weren't this regulated, it would what regulations are in place right now that are causing the homeless?
Well, for example, like, you can't just go set up a tent in a park and survive by living in a tent, right? They would kick you out.
Okay, but what does that have to do with the free market?
Well, you need a place to live, so living in a tent, for example, is better than not living in a tent. Like, it's better than living in the open. It's not a perfect solution.
I'm still waiting to hear where this connects to free market.
Okay, so because there's these regulations that prevent you from providing your own home to the extent that you can. So, like, if you're homeless, a tent might be available to you. But because you get basically punished for doing this by the system that exists with the laws that say you can't camp in a park, you can't get a grounding, and then you can't advance. There's, like, this gap between being homeless and being in a home. There's steps you could have in between that, like a tent, and then maybe like a shack. Maybe in between those, even between those, there could be things, and then maybe there's like a communal indoor house with plumbing. That
See,
would.
this is very hypothetical. Let me put
No,
it
no,
this way.
I'm just saying there's
You're
steps in between, right?
right,
The gap between
right,
being
right.
homeless
Well,
and in a
let me.
house is huge.
But here's where I'm getting the discrepancy is that you mentioned this in the terms of free market. If the free market were freer or unregulated or actually a legitimate free market, then we wouldn't have land property. Like I'm not understanding the connection there.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean land? Like, of course
like
you'd
like
have.
the reason the homeless person can't put the tent up at the park is because it's a public area
Yeah.
that the laws and legislation are regulating it so that you know you can't live there because it's a public space.
Yeah.
But I don't see
Well, you can't.
how that connects to the free market.
Well, you can't. Like, for example, like there's lots of public land, right?
Okay.
It wouldn't bother anybody if someone lived there.
Okay.
But yeah, it's
But
illegal.
what does that have to?
It's
Wait, where
illegal.
where's the free market in that? Where's the free? Like, I don't see the like. Explain to me how the free market would like you're the free market doesn't have anything to do with legislation. It has to do with economics.
Yes. Now, but the state gets in the way and puts these rules in, so you can't do certain
Wait, wait,
things,
wait, wait,
right?
wait. Here's the thing. But the free market doesn't own that land.
I know.
It's not. It's still public land. It'd still be public land, and
Mhm.
whether or not somebody can live there would still be a legislative issue and not an economic issue.
Okay, so pretend the land wasn't public.
Okay, so how would you own any property then?
Well, you'd have, I guess, you bought it off someone that owned it.
But it's free land.
Uh,
Like I could just go claim the land and say it's mine, right?
yeah, sure. Let's say you set up a homestead, right?
Okay.
Like the old days. So
Okay.
you take a land. Well, let's say under the system they had in the States was that you'd go to a place and you'd go to the land titles office and you'd say I want to claim this land and you'd pay your fee or whatever to the guy that organized that or the bank or
Okay.
something. And it was usually cheap, like really cheap for a lot of land. That's why people came there. And then you set up your homestead and then you start paying like your minimal taxes on it as soon as you get up
All
and
right.
running.
So now you've owned the land. All right. So
Yeah,
now you own the land.
yeah.
All right.
And,
So
and
I went and claimed this land as mine. Now all the land's owned. All right. So now where does the homeless person get his land from
Well, the thing is,
in the free market?
not all the land is owned because there's a if you own
Oh, but the public park is now
yeah
a free market
no
place.
there's lots of land out there that's not owned. It's not economical for someone to own a bunch of empty land for no reason.
I would almost venture to say that that's incorrect because for the most part, the land is owned right now, if not by private entities, then by the public ones.
Yeah, exactly. So why does the public need to own that land?
Because it helps us have sustainable uh, resources.
It's not being
Sorry,
used.
I'm not. No, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me try and put this correctly.
Oh, just FYI, I got about 20 minutes left, and I gotta.
That's
end
fine.
it, but
I'm yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
just want to let you know.
But here's I mean, uh, yeah, I still don't see how the free market alleviates this. Like it's just going to cause the same problem in the long run.
Well, not really, because the thing is, as you develop
But
it,
how do you know that? How do you know? You say not really, but how do you know that?
well,
When was
there's never been a free market for one.
right? And so what kind of stipulations in your idea of the free market are there? Like you see what I'm saying?
Well, give me a
We don't
starting
have an
point.
example of how this.
Give
We
me
don't
a,
have an example of how to implement this. We have an infrastructure that's already here. So if we wanted to try and switch over to an entirely free market tomorrow, you see what I'm saying? Like if we wanted to implement it tomorrow,
mhm.
Or start the process that takes us a couple months to implement. Like what are you suggesting the free market is going to do
Well,
for me?
we start off with a blank. We can't start off with a blank slate that doesn't exist, right?
Exactly.
So we start off like we are now, and we work from there. So what we do is we say, okay, we get rid of all this public land, like we keep our parks or whatever, but we get rid of all we put all the other stuff on the market for sale, and the people buy it from the government because that's the person who owns it at the moment, at the market rate, whatever the market rate is, right? So obviously people would bid on this land, and a lot of people wouldn't bid on any land because it's garbage. Why would you want to live on crap land, right? But that land's available for people at the bottom of the market. They still won't buy it because it's available for them, but they're not.
All right, so if I've got the really lush land and the good land, and
Yeah.
I don't give, and I don't let anyone take that land from me, then in the long run, like everyone owns some land.
But if you don't produce,
What I'm saying, say it again.
If you don't produce anything with your land, then you're gonna find that it's unsustainable over time, right?
Why?
Well, where are you getting your money to maintain it? Where are you getting your money to? What do you?
I work a job.
You're working a job.
I've got a bunch of land. I mean, it's a free market. I've got 20 acres, out in the the national forest out here.
Yep.
And I work a job, and I don't have to do anything to maintain the land.
Well, you pay taxes on the land, right?
This in I don't actually have this, but I mean,
yeah.
I'm just making a hypothetical here.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying hypothetically, you'd pay taxes on land.
What I mean,
there's a certain input that the state needs.
If the homeless person goes and stakes land,
yeah,
then they have to pay the taxes on it.
Yep. And what happens if the taxes are too high?
Then you can't afford it.
And then what happens?
Lose the land.
And then the government
goes
doesn't
back
make anything,
to the government,
and then they don't make anything off of it. So they're gonna have to charge a rate of tax that's basically fair. Like if your taxes are too high on land, you just usually sell it because it's too expensive. If that makes sense. Like you could buy an acre for $1, and the government charges you $1 million to keep that acre. Exclusively for you, and you're like, well, why would I do this? It doesn't make any sense. So the government has a competitive limit, right? I can't tell if you're talking right now. I don't know if it's silent or.
Sorry, I am silent. I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm trying to actually visualize this. This idea
it's
in the context of where we're at now.
It's a chaotic. The thing is, the market is chaotic. It's you can't really. It's very, very hard to put a number on anything because it's always in flux. It's always moving. One day something's valuable, another day it's not. One day you got typewriter repairmen, next day you got computers, and typewriter repairmen are basically worthless, right? So all that investment that's put into those people is now like pointless. So like things change all the time. Things are always in flux. So it's hard to put to pin anything down specifically. But the idea behind the free market is that you'll eventually reach what you call market equilibrium. But what happens? So market equilibrium. So imagine there's scales, right? So if you just left everything alone, the scale would balance itself out because things would be incentivized to do so, and you'd reach a market equilibrium. And that takes into account all the people's needs for food, shelter, all this stuff, entertainment, all this technology development, all this stuff, education. But
what about the Pareto distribution in this?
Sorry, the Pareto.
What about yeah?
Oh well, unfortunately, that's unavoidable.
Okay, so to what? Well, let me ask this then: to what extent? To the same extent that we have now, or would it be better off?
Well,
and how do you know?
Well, I'll tell you this for sure. So in Brazil, for example, I'm just going to give them because it's contrast. In Brazil, all the housing's super cheap, right? You can buy a condo there for like 60 grand. In a it's not the best neighborhood, but you could 60 grand, and almost any American could afford that, right? Over a 25-year mortgage.
Okay.
But there's almost no regulations on housing. But if you look at the products, if you buy products like fridges and stuff, the regulations on those are massive, and the prices on them are massive. Now you come here, at least where I live, the housing market is extremely regulated. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm living in a trailer park, and my trailer is probably worth $250,000. It's not special. It's just like any other trailer in the United States.
But where it's located, the land value, all of that
No,
kind of stuff.
yeah, all it's the land value, the land value, all of it's high because it's so highly regulated that like there's no room to move. You know,
Okay.
now if I went to Brazil, I could buy 5 condos for almost the same price as like my trailer's worth, and it's because the regulations are so low. The qualities are the same. They build in Rio. They build an apartment or a condo complex like, almost every week that can house thousands of people. Where I live, like you're lucky if you build a condo every decade, in some cases.
So let me ask this then: what are your thoughts about the speculative trading market?
Oh well, what do you mean, like options trading and stuff?
Just Wall Street in general, I
Oh,
guess.
I would stay away from all options trading, all stuff like that.
Look,
I
I'm
only
asking this in regards to like the 2008 market crash.
oh so I could even take you further back. So you know the Great Depression, right?
Okay.
The popular narrative on the Great Depression is that we didn't regulate the markets and they collapsed and everyone was poor. But they don't tell,
Okay.
and that was 1929. But what they don't tell you was in 1920, 1921, just basically after World War One, there was an even bigger recession or depression, and the president at the time did nothing. He decided to do nothing, and within 6 months it was solved. Because what happened was the market was like, it had a problem, and then it adapted. And the thing is, with human systems, there's always going to be problems. So it had a problem, and then it was allowed to adapt, and no rules were changed. So it adapted to the problem. Now up until 1929, they after that point they got different people involved, and they started putting regulations on the systems. What that did was that changed incentives, and when the market collapsed in 1929, rather than letting it sort of fix itself or reducing regulations so it could fix itself, they increased regulations, and you get what they call the New Deal. And the popular narrative is that's what solved the problem. That's not true. What it did was it extended the problem because they kept changing the rules, and that changed incentives, which made it very hard for the market to adapt. And what people did with money is they just held their money because they're like, well, I'm not going to take a risk because the risk's too big. So what happened in World War II is the reason why it got solved was because World War II, the government was basically like, hey, spend your money now or we're going to take it from you anyways. So obviously at that point, the incentive is, well, I might as well spend my money because I'm going to lose it. So then they spent their money and the economy started to recover. But because of the regulatory regime they put in, it caused people to be reluctant to take risk because the reward was so low, you know, high risk, low reward. People are going to hold their money, so you get the depression.
All right.
And in 2008 was similar.
All right. So
2008 was very similar.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so 2008 was very
Yep.
similar to 1929, where you had all these really stringent regulations, but then they started changing them, and as the system tried to adapt to these new incentives, it causes the collapse, right?
Which incentives?
Oh, so for example, um, the way they changed tax codes and how when you invest in certain ways you don't pay the taxes, in other ways you do. So what that led to was people changing their risks to changing their things to higher risk because it was guaranteed by, say, Freddie Mac, or what was the other one? Fannie Mae. And they would back up these crap mortgages. So people pumped all their money in because the reward was so high and the risk was zero because the risk was all put on Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which was backed by the state. So the state took on all this risk, which these investors were actually smart about, and they leveraged that risk so they didn't have to take any, and that caused them to put all their investments in risky stocks because they knew they couldn't lose. And what happened was the state ended up taking all that burden, and that's why you had this 2008 crash. It wasn't because
so
it wasn't the market; it was the market
speculators.
reacting.
The speculators took a bunch of risk.
Yep.
And knew that they took a bunch of risk.
Yep.
And that the state would have to bear the burden.
Yes, because the state created the incentivizing
All
structures.
Right.
Yes.
But the free market still, like, I mean, to the extent that we have it, still just utilize the loophole in a way that benefited them.
And why wouldn't they? They've been incentivized to do it. It's all about incentives.
Okay.
Right.
But again, like they had a choice. They could have not done that, knowing that it was going to, oh, hey, by the way, this is going to collapse, and millions of people are going to lose their jobs.
Well, let's look at it this
so
way.
where did their choice come? Where did their choice come in that? Like they weren't forced to do the speculative trading. They made a choice. Am I right?
But yeah, sure, yeah. But if they didn't do it,
So
someone else was, and then
they
they'd lose.
utilized the loophole that was created by the government,
Yep.
by the state, and they used it to benefit themselves and not the individuals.
Yes.
So where's the free market in there?
Well, it's not.
Like the government, the government didn't just, hey, you guys start doing this and make sure you fuck everyone else over. No,
Well,
they did create the loopholes, and then they were taken advantage of by the corporations that took advantage of those loopholes.
yeah, but there's no. The thing is like, why would the state?
Oh, and then millions of people lost their jobs because of it. So
Yes.
So I don't see how the free market's incentives, even if they're
Well, at that
their
point, it's not a free
regulations.
market.
But what I'm saying is that if you did reduce those regulations, it's not going to produce this idea of compassionate utilitarian policies.
Well, imagine
They're not going to.
imagine someone says to you, "Hey, I'm going to give you this incentive, and if you don't do it, you're going to be totally screwed." Because that's basically what happened to these guys, and they're like, "Hey, if the government, this is never said in plain words, but basically what it came down to was, hey, you guys got to take advantage of this screwy thing, which is gonna screw everybody. But if you don't, but by not doing it, you're gonna get screwed too. So basically, they're like, well, I don't want to get screwed, so I'm gonna get screwed either way. So I might as well be this guy that doesn't get screwed."
How could they have not have just allocated their resources towards something that was going to, keep them, at least sustain them through a difficult, what I'm trying to say is they had choices other than the incentives, and the choices were not take the incentive and fail. The choices were, yeah, you could not take the incentives and you might fail, but you could also take the incentives not take the incentives and utilize a different structure for your resources that aren't going to bankrupt millions of people.
Well, that's the thing is that I'm giving you the boiled down version. I'm not saying no one has ever said to them, "Oh, hey, by the way, you're going to screw millions of people." They just said, if you don't do this, you're going to get screwed. And so they made the decision in their own interest. There was no other option.
See, but you just said that. Said that, and I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the idea that they had zero options.
Well, they did.
Other than those two.
Okay.
Like you're telling me that there was only two options, and that's it. And you can prove that to me?
Yes, because of the derivatives they were working with, and the incentives that the government was basically giving them through the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae system. They had other options, but all the other options were they're screwed. You understand? Like if they chose the other option.
What I'm trying to say is that does not bode well for the free market system that you're advocating.
No, that's not the thing. The thing is, in a free market, that incentive would never have been created because it would have been impossible.
I don't agree.
It would have been impossible.
They showed very, very highly that the idea of greed is very important to them. Like they proved that it's very important.
Of course, no, it's incentive. It's not about whether greed's important to them. I'm not giving a moral judgment on this. I'm saying that the government it made this incentive for them, which is through a coercive measure. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are coercive entities, and it's because they had an ideological position, which was to provide housing for people that probably couldn't afford the housing model that they were being forced into. So the market was, and plus these investors were like, or these investors were basically being told.
So in a free market, there's no monopolization. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, there's no, there should be no monopolization.
Whoa, hold on. should not be monopolization.
Yes,
but
because
that's
with
not what the markets tend towards monopolization.
no, they don't. Because in order to so for example, imagine even Google has this problem right now. They've lost their ability to create new things. So what they do instead is they buy smaller companies through their existing, because they exist already. They have this advantage in the market against smaller companies. So they just buy them
But
out.
that's still, it doesn't, like, even if they were creating new things, they could have a monopoly.
Doesn't matter. Like the monopolization doesn't come from them buying up other industries.
Sorry, your audio is all over the place right now.
Is it working right now?
Yeah, it's better now. It was like you're in the 1950s.
Oh shoot! Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Give me just a second. Okay. Let's give it 1 more second.
Yeah.
And...
All right. How does that sound?
Oh, much better. I think we're probably gonna have to cut it short, but unfortunately, we'll have to like maybe do the Monopoly discussion later. But
yeah.
But I don't know if I should ask you to look into it just so next time we talk, maybe we could have a better discussion. But basically, with Monopoly, there's not. People argue that there's natural monopolies, but there's always other options. Like, you don't have to go to Google. The reason why you go to Google is because it's a better deal usually, right?
Okay.
But but the reason why it's a better deal is because they have certain they have infrastructure that enables them to undercut competitors. But if they raise their prices too high, that would open the market for competitors. Does that make sense?
That part makes sense, yes.
So, in other words, they don't have a monopoly. They have to undercut themselves in order to monopolize.
Well, what if they just buy up all of the resources that are needed to create their product, and now that they own all those resources, they don't divvy those resources out to anyone else but themselves?
Well, as you gather more and more resources, you have to expend more and more per, say, unit gain in order to do that. And it's to the point where, like, YouTube actually doesn't make any money itself. YouTube is subsidized by Google, and that gives them a market advantage because now they're basically the monopoly on streaming video. But the problem with that is they actually aren't making. They're having to sort of cut their kneecap themselves in other areas in order to gain that advantage. But as soon as they pull that away, there's going to be a bunch of there's Vimeo and all these other competitors that are going to like just saturate the market. So Google's actually.
Well, let me ask you this. This is the question I'm trying to ask you is.
Yeah.
Are there going to be any regulations in a free market?
Well, probably no. It's not just there's no state to do so. My view of the state is this. I don't think the state is necessary, but I think the state's inevitable. So there's inevitable.
You don't think it's necessary, but it's inevitable.
Yes.
So it's a free market society with no government.
Well, if there was no government, the thing is, I think the government's inevitable. So I don't think the free market itself is possible in that sense. It's like an ideal, but freer markets are better than more coercive markets.
So things like the police and fire would just be private organizations?
They always were. They always were until like the last 2 centuries. Right? Like, you had a local sheriff, and everyone would, all the people in that area would contribute like a portion of their food resources they took as the wage for that sheriff. Fire services, well, there was no fire services, but the first ones that came up in the States, they were like a sort of insurance company, right? I think you could actually get rid of a lot of the state functions through like insurance regimes, which would be on obviously a free market basis. Now, I don't think people are going to go for it because I think people are violent and they're going to try to coerce others. So I think that's why I say the state's inevitable, because I don't think people are.
So did you figure that into this idea that of a totally free market? Like, I don't understand. Like, how is this
unravel for you? Like
Oh,
if you like I said, if you got the magic wand, you become president, whatever it is that gives you the power to start enforcing or enacting this free market ideology. Like, how does that unravel? Like, I don't.
I would say through insurance companies. Like you'd have like
Well, I'm talking about like tomorrow. Like if we start trying to move into this free market society tomorrow,
oh
like
I do
what are
that
the
thing with
first
the
steps?
laws. The first thing I'd do is I'd uh give a limit to the legislatures to say you have 1 year to review every single law and put it back into effect. And if you don't hit that law in that year, then we're going to it's gone. It's off the books. And if they somehow got every single law in that year, then I'd do a new program where okay, now you have 6 months to do it again, and then I keep cutting that
Okay,
shorter
so
until we got.
in this system, there you're are we keeping the same political like voting system that we have, the representative system we have? Like,
Oh,
is it going to
I
be
don't know.
less, more? Like what?
I would probably just nuke the whole like system. Not nuke, but get rid of the whole thing.
I know I know I like tear it all down and start from scratch.
The power system, yeah.
The power system.
Not electricity. I mean like the political
I
power
know.
system, yeah.
No, I'm shocked to hear that the power system. I mean, wouldn't the free market be a part of the power system?
No, I would I put all that stuff that the government currently does into like an insurance regime.
I'm not gonna lie. And maybe it's because I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this.
Oh, believe
This
me,
sounds horrible.
how come?
Like you said, people would tend towards violence,
It's
right?
possible.
Like not just physical violence, but like, you said that government's inevitable because people tend towards violence.
Yeah,
The free market would tend towards violence.
no, the free market tends towards cooperation. It always has.
But the Pareto distribution says that it's still going to be there. The violence is there now, and it would be there after.
Not necessarily. It might be less.
Then how? Like through regulation?
No. Well,
No. See, but that's what I'm saying is the Pareto distribution, which you've already accepted as kind of a truth. Am I right?
sure, yeah.
Okay. The Pareto distribution says that currently in our current form of system, that there's a certain amount of violence in the system, right?
Oh well, that's not what the Pareto distribution says. It doesn't say
No,
there's a certain
not
amount of violence.
specifically, but we're talking about the mathematical structure of how the Pareto distribution aligns itself.
Well,
So if you map it onto what our current economic system has, then you can see the Pareto distribution, right?
Why is that violence? I don't understand how that correlates with violence.
But violence is in this regard the same violence that you would have in the free market.
What violence is that?
The what, like when you said the word violence 2 minutes ago, you were talking about it in the form of, well, the free markets would tend towards violence, which inevitably causes government.
No,
right?
no. I say the government doesn't. The violence doesn't cause a government. I'm saying that the government is violent. Like governance is violence, right?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I kind of like look in so I've always like the whole heart of my discussion in this conversation is from my ground up perspective, right? So in that regard, the government is us, and that means that we are the ones that are violent, right? Not the government.
No, I don't think we're the government.
But hold on. Yeah, but we are.
No,
like literally.
Well, tell me this: how many individuals have committed a genocide without a government involved?
I don't know.
Was the genocide of
was
the genocide of the American Indians, was that possible without the government involved?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. The answer is yes.
I don't think so. You could have.
Well, the answer is yes, because before the government was formed here, like, yeah, they had the English government backing the original pilgrims and settlers here in America, but for the majority of the the time that they were there, they weren't governed by the British government. They were governed by their own values of the law, the structure of the law that they had used before them. But that doesn't mean that that it was enforced on them.
No, but think about
They
this.
were enforcing it out of their own hands.
But no, but think about this. You and a person could have a fight, and one of you could die, right?
Right.
And you could have a conflict, a deep conflict, and people
Right.
could die. But it takes a state to wipe out a population.
But how is that any different than the violence that the government, the free market, and an individual can cause on another individual?
Because
Like, you're framing this in the form of genocide,
yeah.
but you're trying to make a gross exaggeration to make a point.
No,
And I
no.
understand what you're doing
No,
there.
I'm saying that
Well, because we're not talking specifically about genocide. We're talking about the violence that a government, you know, uses to control the people that it governs. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about their ability to wipe out individuals. We're talking about how they govern individuals. That's the violence that you're talking about.
Well, no, the violence I'm saying that although you can have individual violence between individuals or small groups, in order for like a large group to be wiped out, that does literally take like a war, or it takes state action, like coordinated state action for a quote ideological ends, which may be, say, wiping out another group, and they'll claim rhetorically for self-defense or whatever.
Look, hold on.
But
All right, but this started with the sentence that even in a free market society, if that were to ever come about, that it would tend towards governance, and that is violent.
well,
That was the
not,
sentence
not
you
necess-
used.
not
Now, you did not mean physical violence when you said violence, correct?
no, well,
Specifically.
it could be coercion, right?
Correct. Now, that's what I'm saying here, is that you've grossly exaggerated this. And I don't mean grossly as in, like, you know, negatively. I mean, like, ghoulish overkill, Summer. Ghoulish overkill. I was using ghoulish overkill. Like, you're trying to make a point, and you're using genocide as the event or idea of violence, but you were specifically talking about the coercion of government, and that can include genocide. That's what I'm saying. I understand what you meant by violence. I understood it when you said it.
Okay.
Okay, so you're saying that the that we would tend towards that coercion. All right, but why do we tend towards that coercion? Answer me that.
Oh, well, it could be many different reasons. I would say corruption.
So corruption in the free market would cause that. But what causes that
Well,
corruption?
it's not corruption. Oh, well,
Human nature.
Yeah, human nature.
Exactly. But that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to tell you, is that the Pareto distribution for that, like, that's what I was trying to equate here, was that you're going to have that coercion and corruption and violence in any system you implement.
Well, yeah, of course, you're going to have systems that incentivize good behavior versus bad behavior as well. So if you have a system that incentivizes more good behavior, like associated with like freedom and being able to do things as long as you're not hurting other people, and you have a moral system that develops out of this and cooperation, you have more cooperation, you're going to have less violence. That's just the way things happen. If you have less,
but that's where I'm disagreeing with you, is that you're suggesting that we would suddenly be able to work together in a completely, harmonistic view. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, that's what I'm disagreeing with.
I'm not saying
Like,
I'm not saying that we're going to be perfect.
You're telling me that the free market is, but that's what I'm hearing. I'm
Okay,
hearing
well, listen
that.
to this. I'm saying that if you does cooperation lead to less violence?
Yes.
Well, then you'd want a system. So you want a system that incentivizes cooperation, right?
Sure.
So a system that incentivizes cooperation is going to be one that disincentivizes coercion.
Well, but again, like you're putting all your eggs in this one basket, then saying that, all right, well, the only actually fully cooperative system is a free market. But on the same note, you also agree that we as humans tend towards corruption, and again, I'm not
I
trying to
don't
say like
think
the whole,
I don't think we tend towards corruption. I just think it's possible,
it's
right? It's
but
the
it's
possible
no,
end
no,
of
no,
the
no, no, no.
extreme.
It's not that it's possible, it's that it's ingrained, it's part of us. Like in any system, that corruption is going to manifest itself.
Yeah.
Like you just, like, even if the laws update and try to correct for that corruption, it can and will still pop its head up, right?
Oh, I mean, there's going to be bad actors in anything, right? But
Exactly. But that's my point, is like,
you want to
so if
marginalize
we
them.
looked at the socialist system was meant to be a cooperative system. Like that's what it was meant to
I
be.
don't
Like
think so. No, I don't think so.
but no, hold on.
That's their claim.
When you look at it historically, you are correct. It was definitely not a cooperative system. But the mentality that formed it, the reason that people wanted it, was that it was an idea of cooperation. It was definitely tarnished, and
I don't even think that's
it,
the case. I think even at the time when they were forming it, it wasn't cooperative, because it directly hits against certain things that are obviously uncooperative.
But co-oping a business so that the individuals within that business share on the production of that business is cooperation, is it not?
No,
Like,
I disagree.
Well, how?
Well, because who's cooperating?
The employees.
Yeah, but the employer might not be cooperating with that. He stands to lose.
There's not an employer. The employees own the business.
Oh, I thought you were saying you convert, like you take a business that exists and then make it into a cooperative. Because in that case, you'd have to rob someone of their property, right? So that would be uncooperative. Now, if you're going to form a co-op,
right, but again, like I'm suggesting that any one of these systems have just as much cooperation and just as much corruption due to human nature.
Well, maybe. Well, we'll have to continue this another time because I got to take off. But I really enjoyed this. So we can do it again?
This has been great.
Okay. Well,
absolutely.
I might be available again this week. So I'll just
tomorrow I don't work. Tomorrow, so I'll be available tomorrow.
Okay, I'll give you a call when I get it all started up. Hopefully, I have some stuff to do, but I should have a lot of time.
All right, sounds great.